It is hard to believe that we are already at the end of 2023, but that's where we are. The good part about this is we get to have a look ahead at the astrology of 2024. And joining me today is Alex Skyles, who's going to go through all of the big transits that we need to know so that we can understand the energy that we're going to be dealing with. Alex, thank you for joining me.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
So the last few years have been intense and unlike, I think, anything else that we've experienced in our lifetime. And from everything that I've been reading about the astrology that's coming in 2024 and even into 2025, the energy just keeps ramping up. So before we get into the individual transits that are going to be happening and sort of breaking those down, I wanted to talk about a couple of, I guess, the planets and the bigger transits that are going on. For a couple of years, we've had there has been conversation about how we're entering the age of Aquarius. And yet, when you listen to some astrologers, they sort of say, well, we're not actually coming into the age of Aquarius for a little while. We're just sort of in the doorway of that time starting. Where do you sit on that question in terms of when do we enter the age of Aquarius?
Well, I think it's obvious with Pluto and Aquarius, but in 2012, that's when, the precession of the equinox and the poles of the earth are now looking at the constellation of Aquarius. So technically, and astronomically we are, but now with Pluto and Aquarius, I think this is where we start seeing it actually come into play, and definitely by 2025 when Pluto's officially in Aquarius, because in 2024 it's going to move into Aquarius, then it's going to retrograde back into Capricorn again. It's going to stay at 29 degrees. It's not going any further than 29 degrees. And by the time we get into 2025 again, it's going to be in Aquarius. So I think, overall, it's kind of like a preparation, because Pluto is going to be there for 20 years, but precession of the equinox, that's a 2,500 year roughly, cycle. So whether in 2,500 years we look like the Jetsons or, like we're some sci-fi movie, who knows? But I think what we're really coming into is a massive revolution, and definitely in the last Pluto Aquarius transit, after the Revolutionary War. This is the world that we live in now. So definitely the world that we're moving into over the next 20 years is not going to look the same at all. And with Pluto and Capricorn, it definitely does not look the same as it looked in 2008. I don't know. There's so many angles on what the age of Aquarius is. There's that song from the 60s, like this hippy dippy, we're all going to be one unity, and we're going to separate from all the things that control us and bind us, and all live on communes and have our own little farms and stuff. I think that may be true. And I think with Uranus and Taurus, I think people are contemplating more than ever how they can somewhat disconnect from the status quo, or what everybody else is doing, in the matrix, to sustain themselves. That's what Uranus and Taurus has been about. So, Uranus is going to be dispositing Pluto with Pluto and Aquarius. So there is going to be some sort of rebellion against, the system and the matrix.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask when I was reading about the age of Aquarius, and when I can only speak for myself, but when I think of the age of Aquarius, I automatically go to the song. I go to the hippy dippy place, and I love it. It's a beautiful notion, right? Like you think of the sort of love revolution in the 70s and what have you.
Yeah.
But when I was reading some of these articles on stepping into the age of Aquarius, there were a lot of them that were talking about the evils of capitalism. And the insinuation that I understood from the articles that were angled that way was, we're breaking down structures, capitalism is evil. And so, and the age of Aquarius is seen as people coming together, which is a wonderful thing. But is it necessarily, or is it possibly a move towards socialism, which some people really want, whereas other people appreciate capitalism? From an astrological point of view, is socialism the ultimate end?
I mean, I think that's the battle we're in right now is we're not seeing it as much post COVID, I mean, it's not the hype as much, but definitely pre-COVID, pre-2020 election, you know, um, definitely 2016, the Bernie Sanders thing and all of that, and that Hillary Clinton, if she wins, she's gonna move us into a socialist dictatorship that's perpetual war, this and that. And it's like, well, you know, we've been walking the line of socialism and capitalism, I think, in the United States for a long time. And I think it's pretty wild because South America has been Venezuela obviously suffered tremendously from socialism, but I know you're probably aware of what just happened in Argentina, right? I don't know his name, but
Yeah, I don't know his name either.
they're calling him the South American, Argentinian Donald Trump. So there is this rise of, you know, conservative, Republican, capitalist, freedom loving, um, whatever you want to call it across the world in a sense. I think Italy also elected a female conservative Republican. I don't know if anything's gone good with that. I'm not sure, but on the other end of things, there's still like these movements towards socialism and, you know, young people still believing and, calling for it and starting little Aquarian kind of groups to get together and push it and promote it. And you see it across social media. But then at the same time, you kind of see this extreme, almost like the Andrew Tate syndrome, where there's young people and young boys and even women who are just like taking on really old school traditional values and definitely with the Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, more religious values. Like I've experienced that a lot in the past year where I've seen people I know personally who weren't necessarily religious, like come at me with some really heavy religious stuff, which, like we're all spiritual beings, like we all love God and we have our own views of that, but I mean on a religious level. So I think with the age of Aquarius and socialism, I don't really know, but I think maybe some sort of techno capitalism or techno socialism, because that's what we're seeing is this whole smart city thing. They want to get us all in electric cars, and I don't know. I saw something the other day. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe that they're passing some bill where they're putting kill switches in all these cars by 2026. Is that
Yep,
true?
that passed.
Yeah. So techno socialism, techno capitalism, like what's the difference? So I don't really know, but I think Pluto and Aquarius is going to show us, and it's definitely going to. I mean, when Pluto first went into Aquarius, we kind of saw people branch out a little more. We kind of saw people come together a little bit more and have more to say, and validate each other in groups. But we also saw like all the UFO stuff come out. We saw this new crazy AI, Chat GPT stuff come onto the surface, like the questioning of whether AI is going to take our jobs, or what our sovereignty is in relation to artificial intelligence. Like these are all things that we're going to be experiencing through Pluto and Aquarius.
Is it possible that the push to get away from capitalism and the push to go towards socialism right at the beginning of this sort of age of Aquarius time period for us, is it possible that we are going to find a happy medium somewhere in the middle. But to get there, it's bouncing between the extremes.
Well, this is something that a controversial man named Barack Obama brought to my attention one time, and he's a very smart guy. Whatever your opinion is about him, he's a very intelligent guy. And one thing I learned from him, or was enlightened or became aware of, he said that the American system has worked and has functioned because of the Democratic and the Republican Party, and how liberalism and conservatism create this push and pull over these 4-year or 8-year elections or terms. And without that kind of dynamic, it wouldn't work, because what doesn't seem to work is this one way, whether it's one way of socialism or one way of fascism. And what Barack Obama was saying is that this whole wave of every so often when we get a democratic liberal president, they're implementing these policies and pushing this agenda and this kind of propaganda. And when we get a conservative president or a Republican, they're pushing one agenda and one kind of propaganda. And it's this kind of dynamic over time that seems to make it function. And I think I agree with that, but that's ever changing. But I don't know. I know the utopia is the happy medium, but the challenge is through Pluto and Aquarius is how we're relating to artificial intelligence and how we're utilizing artificial intelligence, and technology, and using it to our advantage, and not fully rejecting it, but also drawing boundaries with it, because Pluto is about boundaries. It's the furthest boundary out that we know so far. So it's like, well, we got to have boundaries, because I know Elon Musk has said very clearly that we need to regulate AI, and some people who aren't as intelligent or close to AI disagree with him, but it's the man who's literally at the top of the creation of artificial intelligence. And, he has probably the largest investment in creative vision of artificial intelligence. I think we should listen to him. I really do, and we should really take that very seriously. I really do think that. But whatever that middle ground is, we're gonna find out.
Well, we are. And just before I get to the next question, I just wanted to point out to everyone who's watching, before we started actually filming, you said to me, I really want to keep this as a spiritual conversation. And you said, but it's almost impossible with the astrology that we have coming up in 2024. And my question to you was, is that because of this Pluto still being in Capricorn? And the answer was yes. So as much as we would love to keep it in that realm, we keep coming back down to the 3D because we have to, and that's where everything is at the moment, unfortunately. The growth cycle we haven't gotten to just being able to be in the 5D. So this year, because Jupiter moving signs is always a big deal, because Jupiter moves only once a year, and Jupiter is coming into Gemini this year, and that is Gemini is Jupiter's detriment. Is that correct? Is Jupiter in detriment in Gemini?
Yeah, so Jupiter is ruled by Sagittarius. So, I mean, I think with Jupiter and Gemini, a lot of untruths could be exposed, especially towards the end of 2024, which we'll get there. Like, the whole Mercury retrograde in Sag, square Saturn, opposing Jupiter. This is post-election, and yeah, we're trying to keep it spiritual here, but like this is a big year in the 3D realm. So yeah, Jupiter isn't the most happy in Gemini. But at the same time, a lot of things that we've overlooked, or maybe, thought were one way, are definitely going to appear to, it's going to be revealed that, what we thought was true wasn't actually true, And I think a lot of that's going to come down to this Pluto and Aquarius and like how things are being manipulated on a very Plutonian level and how things are being governed on a very Capricorn level. Um, a lot of facts are going to be exposed, but also a lot of truths as well.
So Jupiter is not going to retrograde back into Taurus. Once it comes into Gemini, it stays in Gemini,
And
even when it's going through its
and it
retrograde.
won't there will be no conjunction with the sun either.
Ah,
With Jupiter and Gemini, it will not conjunct the sun. So every year, I mean, Jupiter conjuncts the sun. Jupiter and the sun come together, and that's the most benefic day of the year. I mean, we're gonna have Jupiter in Taurus, conjunct the sun in Taurus at 28 degrees on May 18th. But with
okay. So
Jupiter
that's the one conjunction for the year, and then it won't conjunct again until it moves out of Gemini.
into Cancer, yeah.
Normally, when a planet is in detriment, it's not the most fun transit, but Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and it's generally, we love when Jupiter moves because it's different gifts and things that we get. Is it going to be a rough transit, or is it just that it's not going to be as fun as what maybe it is in other signs?
I mean, there are definitely moments, especially when I looked at December, I'm like, wow, it's going to be a very interesting time with Jupiter and Sagittarius season, Sun opposing Jupiter. Like, there's a lot going on. It's not that it's not going to be fun. Like, Jupiter and Gemini is fun. Gemini is fun. It's very playful. It's very teenager like, I think there can definitely be moments. There is a moment in June where Venus and Jupiter are going to come together. I wrote it in my notes, but there is a moment in June where we're going to experience Jupiter and Gemini in a very benefic, wonderful way, as Jupiter should be. But yeah, I mean, I think about 2012 too with Jupiter and Gemini, which that was a that was a good year. 2012 was a good year, but it was also a massive year of things coming out. Like, there was a lot of stuff that came out onto the surface, and I definitely noticed a lot of people around me having a spiritual awakening in some sort of way, or like things that they thought were one way, like became a whole nother truth. New facts were revealed. All of a sudden, coconut oil was like the most important thing. Like, you started seeing all the health trends on Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, and that was very Neptune and Pisces, but with Jupiter and Gemini bringing all new facts to the surface and looking at it from both sides, in a more hermetic way, and sometimes looking at things from both sides isn't always the most fun, and it's, with Jupiter, it's very challenging to your beliefs. It can really put what you really believe to the test. And holding that faith. Like, this year is going to be a test of faith. Jupiter and Gemini, it's a test of faith, and also like being neutral on your beliefs. Like, if you're staying neutral in your beliefs, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with when Jupiter is not having its most fun, especially when we get into Sag season, and Virgo season too. Is to be neutral, and but also not be afraid to express your thoughts and your own truth as well. But seeing from both angles, seeing from other people's angles, and not getting too stuck in boasting your beliefs, I think is important for 2024.
The other big thing with Jupiter is Jupiter's in Taurus at the moment.
Yeah.
It is going to conjunct Uranus in Taurus
Yeah.
before it moves into Gemini. How is that going to feel energetically?
Well, this goes to, I mean, when it comes to Taurus, we're talking the financial system. We're talking how we're sustaining ourselves, how we're managing our money. And with Uranus, it's, you know, the revolution of AI, cryptocurrency. I think that's the biggest thing with Jupiter and Uranus is digital currency, these digital IDs, all this kind of Uranian, Aquarian digital stuff. Like, I think also like Apple's coming out with its new AI vision thing in February. I think it's February leading up to um this Jupiter Uranus conjunction. Like, we're going to see a massive revolution in technologies, but technologies that really allow us to sustain ourselves in different ways and in ways we didn't think of, didn't expect. I think in 2024 with Jupiter Uranus, this is one of my favorite transits of the year. Been looking forward to this one for a long time. But I think there's going to be new technologies that reveal themselves that are really going to help people. But at the same time, like we were talking about with Pluto and Aquarius, is, not being afraid to utilize them, and not wanting to go full blown hippie and just want to detach from reality. And that because there's two sides to Aquarius, where it's like you want to be in the matrix and you want to hack the matrix and utilize the matrix to your own advantage. But the other side of Aquarius is wanting to completely check out and detach and just go live in your own society and in your own world and not even recognize, where everybody else is at. So I think, with this new revolution of technology, it's not being afraid to utilize it, you know. But I think there could be some really massive shakeups on the financial front. I mean, every year you see people on the news or people on Instagram or people on YouTube making videos and promoting videos like, this is the year. It's all going down in the financial markets. Like, on this day, it's gonna collapse. I don't know if there's gonna be a collapse or not. I have no idea. But I do know when we have Jupiter Uranus conjunction, there's always some kind of shakeup in the financial system, for sure. Or whether it's earthquakes, it's Taurus is the earth sign. We could see some massive shifts, in the physical realm, whether it's, things of that nature, crazy weather, massive crazy weather, but also, like people having to come together to create, you know, um, a more sustainable future, and holding on to that belief as well. Like, I think collectively, like where we're being pushed to, especially with whatever's gonna happen in 24 and how events are gonna play out, is really gonna challenge people's belief systems. But with Jupiter and Taurus and Uranus and Taurus, it's like we really have to believe that we can create that reality and utilize all these new revolutionary things coming into our lives and share that belief collectively to actually make it real, because that's what Taurus does. Taurus makes shit real, you know, and with Uranus, it kind of has to shock and prod you, or is Uranus and Taurus, so a cattle prod, maybe, it's like to, initiate that spark. And that spark is coming this year, which I think it's going to be exciting. It might be very uncomfortable for some people, a lot of people. Uranus and Taurus has been very uncomfortable. Uranus does not want to be in Taurus. It wants to be in Aquarius. It wants to be where Pluto's at. So Uranus and Taurus, for me personally, I haven't said anything personally, but it's been just absolutely wild. It's been fun. It's been crazy, and it's taken me all over the place. And I've just had to give it to God, and that's kind of what it is. It's like with Uranus, you just got to let the electrical current kind of carry you wherever it's going to be. So
I think letting go, I've always said for me personally as well, that one of the themes in this life for me is learning to let go of things, because I can hang on to things so tightly. And I've learned that in those moments where you legitimately let go, not say I've let go of something, but actually let go of it, that's when everything you've been working for sort of comes together. And I think Uranus in Taurus for me, I don't want to say anxiety because I don't suffer anxiety, but it's almost just a sense of unease at times. But yeah, it's learning exactly what you said, to just let go and breathe and go where you're meant to go. And you always end up where you're meant to be. So then we move on to everybody's, should I say, favorite retrograde or least favorite retrograde? Mercury retrograde. So there's 3 of them in 2024. And essentially, they're all in fire signs, apart from one quick ingress back into Virgo. Is that significant that all of the Mercury retrogrades are going to be in fire signs?
Maybe so. I mean, that's great. Before the show, when we were talking about it, you brought that to my attention. Even though we mapped them all out, I didn't even realize that. And I think there is a significance. So, I mean, we're going to see. Let's just go through the dates of when Mercury's going to retrograde. So, I mean, that's what everybody wants to know, right?
Right.
This is what everybody's going to mark in their calendar. So, April Fool's Day, Mercury's going to retrograde at 27 degrees Aries, I'm pretty sure. And it's going to be in Aries for good, but it's also going to, I mean, why don't we just look at it? Now is a good time to look at it, huh?
And Mercury goes direct on January 1st. So we actually have Mercury retrograde on New Year's Eve.
This year.
Yes.
Yes. And Sag, yep. Yes, you're right.
Look at me doing my research.
Love it. I love it. And we're going to have Mercury retrograde in Sag at the end of 2024 too, which is going to be wild. Yeah, let's just move to April 1st here. And I think it's interesting too, because when Mercury retrogrades in Aries, it's going to cross Chiron, because we haven't talked about it yet, but we should definitely talk about it. That's very important. I think it's the North Node Chiron conjunction. That's going to happen in February. But as we go through this Mercury retrograde, if we're looking over here, it's going to cross Chiron, and then it's going to cross the North Node. And then as it crosses Venus, and then it gets towards the North Node at 15 degrees, Mercury goes direct at 15 degrees on the North Node. So this is a very karmic Mercury retrograde, and especially with Chiron here. And I guess we should talk about Chiron North Node conjunction, because I think this ties into it. So in February, February 19th, Chiron and the North Node are going to conjunct at 16 degrees. So, like this year, I think this sets a tone this year too, is that collectively, like we've been experiencing so much wounds to our identity, and definitely with Chiron and Aries, all this identity stuff is come into play. Which we don't have to go into too much detail with, but I think everybody knows what we're talking about. It's like this confusion of our identity, of like, who am I? What's my place in the world? And, like all these cataclysmic and traumatic events that have been taking place in the Pluto Capricorn world have been really kind of hitting that in such a harsh way. Thank God Pluto and Chiron won't square, in Aries. But with this Mercury retrograde, it's going to go direct on the North Node where Chiron and the North Node met. So there's this kind of karmic thing playing out in the Aries realm and with our identities. And definitely, I think by the time, with Chiron and the North Node conjuncting in February, like we're going to be experiencing so many different feelings and emotions, especially with what's coming as Pluto comes back into Aquarius in January. And then shortly after that, with the conjunction of Chiron and the North Node, it's like there's going to be so much confusion about where we stand. And, I don't think a lot of those feelings and emotions that are going to come up with Chiron North Node are going to be clear until we get to this Mercury retrograde. And with this Mercury retrograde, it's going to bring up so much of what was happening in February and throughout this Chiron and Aries conjunction. Because I feel like collectively we've been experiencing so many different kind of traumatic things that have affected us on an individual level. But I feel like this year we're gonna see not just the children being born during this transit, but people finally like knowing their place. Like, I am here to share my traumatic and, harsh experiences to help people, help, you know, heal people in a way, but on the other hand, there's going to be people who are really going to be experiencing some deep traumatic stuff that they're going to need these people who are now feeling to be called to step up to the plate. And I think that's what the Chiron North Node conjunction is going to be about, is people being called to step up to the plate. And that was their destiny in the first place, you know.
And one question about this particular Mercury retrograde, and we're going to bring it back to self for a moment, because why not? It's in Aries. You and I are both Aries, a
Yes.
day apart, different years. But will this, because there's a lot going on with that Mercury retrograde, will that specifically affect Aries sun, rising moon a little more than other people? Obviously, it's always dependent on somebody's chart.
For sure.
But being that it's all of that is happening in Aries, are we all going to feel that impact just that little bit more?
I feel like the Aries ones, especially in the second decan, from 10 to 20 degrees. If your sun's in that place or you have any natal planets in that area, you're definitely going to be the ones who are being called to step up to the plate. But all the cardinal signs, I feel like, are going to be feeling this, whether you're a Cancer, a Libra, or a Capricorn. Like, they're the ones who are going to be feeling it the most, and maybe the Cancers are going to need the Aries people more than ever. They're going to need to hear that direct Aries kind of, uninhibited kind of communication, especially with this Mercury retrograde and going direct on the North Node, where Chiron and the North Node meet essentially. And Mercury conjuncting Chiron, going back and forth, and Venus is also there. Like, that whole time in the middle of to the end of February, I mean, is such a Chiron moment. I mean, the conjunction is happening in February, but this is the moment where we're really feeling it. Like, our thoughts are processing it. It may be unclear, but definitely as, Mercury goes direct, like, definitely the Aries people are going to be like, you know what? I need to step up to the plate. Whether I need to heal myself or heal myself so I can heal others. Because, yeah, there's a lot of shit going down this year in the world, and that's the thing. That's the relationship between Aries and, Capricorn, with all this Pluto and Capricorn. It's like, yeah, Aries, like, at the end of the day, even if there's all this Capricorn stuff going on out here, up here, everywhere, Aries can just say, you know what, that's cool. I'm just going to stay in my own lane and do whatever the hell I want because that's what I believe in. And I think that's kind of a big message here, is that, sure, there is some insane shit going on. And definitely in 2024, like, we're going to see things we haven't seen yet that we may have not have seen in 250 years that are really going to shake things up. Really, just a lot. And the message from Chiron in the North Node and Mercury in this first Mercury retrograde of the year is like, you know what? Like, you have to stay in your own lane, to heal yourself and to heal others, and to be that person, because the Aries takes authority, and in order to really, like, pierce through all the craziness going on, you have to be willing to take that authority. So yeah, this is definitely, it's an interesting thing too, with all these Mercury retrogrades being in fire signs too, of like serious ambition, and trusting your intuition, because Mercury being ruled by an air sign and an earth sign, it's like, well, like, you think more intellectually and more practically, but with all these Mercury retrogrades and fire signs, it's like fully just trusting your intuition and just knowing when to hit the gas, you know. But also with Mercury retrograde in these fire signs is knowing when to stop. as well, or knowing when to hit the brakes, or knowing when to slow down. Um, and to really activate that healing part of yourself, like sometimes you do have to slow down. Aries, it's not easy for them to slow down.
No, it's not. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. I can only speak for myself, but
Hmm.
do you feel the same way? Because when there is a forced slowdown, I just sit there and go, oh, and I enjoy taking a moment when I choose to, but when I'm forced to stop,
Yeah,
oh my goodness, just let me
it's hard.
go. So then we've got our next Mercury retrograde starting August 4th. And so does it start in Virgo and then retrograde back into Leo?
I'm pretty sure it starts in Virgo.
Okay. And then at the same time, Venus is going to ingress into Virgo when Mercury's turning retrograde
Yes.
in Virgo.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, here we go, right here. So Venus is in a Mercury ruled sign as Mercury goes direct in its ruling sign on Regulus. And this is right after the new moon in Leo. So, and for sure, like you said, Mercury's going to retrograde back into Leo by the 15th of August. Mercury's already going to be back into Leo, and then Venus and Mercury are going to be at its Kazemi point, and Venus has already moved on past Mercury. So definitely with this one, I think it is like a big ego check, you know, as well. Venus is going to oppose Saturn during this uh, Mercury retrograde. And I think this is a big ego check, And like we said, like it is about knowing when to slow down, knowing when to bite your tongue, knowing when to listen to other people's opinions. With Mercury and Leo, I think that's as great and big and bombastic as it can be, and as creative and as powerful of a creative mental energy as it can be. When it goes retrograde, it's like, all right, like sometimes you got to listen to other people's ideas, and you need to hear other people's ideas, and with Venus also opposing Saturn during this retrograde here, it's like, what in our relationships are realistic? What kind of, with Saturn and Pisces, like things have gotten a little sloppy, you know. They can get a little messy, we can get caught up in like the big spiritual realm and the big high, heavens. And with Venus and Virgo, like, and Venus in its detriment as well, it's not at its best place in Virgo. But when it's opposing Saturn, it's like really, mirroring our values in our relationships, and where our relationships have gotten a little messy, where we've gotten a little too optimistic, and definitely with our money, and our finances. This is definitely like a moment where we gotta have a massive reality check, and rethinking through this Mercury retrograde with Venus opposing Saturn, like rethinking, like, okay, like maybe I've thought a little too big. Maybe I need to be a little bit more practical with how I manage my resources, how I communicate my creative ideas, and how I work with others. Because the thing too, the day that Venus is opposing Saturn, Mercury retrograde is going to oppose the moon. It's a full moon in Leo. So on the day that Venus is opposing Saturn, so this is a full moon in Leo with Pluto, or a full moon in Aquarius with Pluto in Aquarius, and Sun Kazemi. I haven't even looked at this, so I'm just now looking at this, and I think this is exactly what we are just saying, is that this is a reality check, and it's an ego check, and it's knowing when to slow down, and it's being able to see other people's ideas and being able to participate within a group of people and not just carrying on with yourself and leaving everybody behind. I think with Pluto and Aquarius too, like that's going to be the challenge for every time we're hitting Leo season for the next 20 years. That's going to be the challenge is like, all right, like I want to shine big, bright and bold, but I have to learn how to, you know, connect with others and participate and not just carry on my own whim, because it never works out in the long run when you're just controlling and doing things on your own. Like you need other people to be inspired by. You need the feedback. And I think with this Mercury retrograde in Leo, definitely on this full moon with Venus opposing Saturn, it's like we're going to be getting a lot of feedback from a lot of people and where we have, you know, not seen things clearly, where we have thought too largely. Um this is that's pretty wild Mercury retrograde. What else? I mean, Mars, Jupiter just conjunct as well. Um, I mean, there's just a squaring Saturn, Jupiter squaring Saturn as well. So I mean, there's a lot of truths coming out as well. I mean, this is definitely 2024 is such a year of facts being brought to the surface, and every time these mutable planets square each other like this is going to be a challenge of what is real and what is true, what's not real, what was false. Um, with Mars there could definitely be some kind of conflict. Mars, Jupiter square Saturn, T square to Venus as well. Like, I mean, there can be some sort of conflict over things that were said with Mercury retrograde that were misunderstood. When people's egos flared up too much and they just were not willing to see another person's side. So it's like we have to be willing to always see the other side of things, and definitely with all of the Gemini energy, you know, coming this year as well. Like we said, it's like we had to be neutral, we had to see it from both sides, we had to be hermetic about things.
And then we've got our last Mercury retrograde, November 25th, and it goes direct December 15th. So is that happening in Sagittarius?
Yeah, so November 20. So this is right after the election.
Well, and then I was going to bring up Mars because there's so much going on with Mars. And then I thought we could go through all the other significant transits that are going on. But I almost think, do we leave Mars until we get to those transits because it's so locked in with everything else? Oh, so much going on.
Yeah. I really think like to see it in sequential order from October eclipses to Mars going into Leo, well, to Mars opposing Pluto, Mars going into Leo, which it's going to be in shadow, um, going into the Mercury retrograde in Sag. Like, I just think this whole time period of the end of the year, October, November, and December, it's just gonna be a circus, and it could be many outcomes. That's the thing. It's like when you're playing a role-playing video game and there's like you could you could be playing like a role-playing video game and there's 5 different ways to end the game. Right? That's what all this mutable energy towards the end of the year is like, from what I'm seeing and feeling and knowing what's going on in the world, because it is much more broader. Like when we're talking about the Aries stuff and the Chiron, like that's much more personal and of the self. Like towards the end of the year, like it becomes less personal and much more global, you know, and it's it's just going to be a circus. Mercury retrograde again in a fire sign, 22 degrees of Sag, and this is so hard to do it with because it's just so much like that's being revealed through all this mutable energy, like coming out of what was true and what was not true and what we thought it was going to be, and it all is pointing towards our beliefs. We all believed that it was going to be this way. Some people all believed that it was going to be Trump. Some people all believed that it was going to be, well, we don't really know yet who the other person is going to be. But, you know, it's not going to be what we think it is. Like, this is going to be the most challenging time. I can't give my opinion on who's going to win this, who's going to be the president. I don't know. But I will say, looking at this and looking at Donald Trump's chart, if he doesn't come out swinging and laughing, saying, "Ha ha, I told you so," amongst, you know, what the media is telling you once again, oh, it could never happen. Like they said in 2016, he will never, not possible, right? Like, it might be one of these ha-ha moments again. Because if you put his chart to the election chart and to this chart and to everything going on towards the end of the year, it's just like, there's no way. How could it be anybody else? It's hard to not talk about the election looking at this shit. Like, for real. Because it's so crazy. But I just think that, like, through this Mercury retrograde in Sag, like, so many things of deception are just gonna just bubble up to the surface. And definitely with Pluto and Aquarius anyway, like, it's gonna bubble up. And right through that election time, it's like Mars opposing Pluto, like, you damn right. And like, things that were being investigated, maybe being investigated in total secret, finally come out. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, through October and the eclipses, like, some serious shit that's been under some kind of secret investigation or whatever, it's going to be used as some ammunition to totally sway the direction of how things are going to go, you know. But for people individually, like, I just think people are going to be shocked no matter what, whether just in their personal lives, about the relationships and just their everyday lives. They're going to be experiencing things through November and December that it's just like, wow, I really thought it was this way. I really thought this person was that. Or I really didn't think of this person in that way. And now I see them in a much bigger light. It can go in multiple directions. Cause, like, with all the Sag, Pisces, and Gemini energy going on here, it's like three circuses going on at once. Like, imagine three circuses in one room that aren't acknowledging each other, but are all playing, right? Or like being at a music festival with a bunch of people on drugs and spaced the fuck out, and every band is playing at once, and no one has any idea that somebody else is playing. Like, it's just, there's this like total like dissonance, if that makes any sense. Because, like, when you imagine having two radio stations playing at once and you're trying to listen to two songs at one time, it's like you can't focus on one thing at all. It's like there's this total lack of focus, this total like smoke over our eyes, this mirage in the desert. Like, you're in the desert and you're looking so far out and you can't tell what's really, start hallucinating. That's, to me, what the end of this year is kind of feeling like. It's just this madness, this circus, and this. I'm not gonna say disappointment. I don't want to use the word disappointment, but I do want to use like absolute shock, whatever the hell it is. I don't know. I'm not predicting anything of what it's gonna be. I just know it's gonna be a shock, and it's gonna be a riot. It might be funny. Mercury and Sag, like, as much as it doesn't like to be in Sagittarius, can't help but laugh. Sagittarius makes good jokes. So whatever it is, we'll make a good joke out of it, And Gemini likes to have fun. So, as crazy as it's going to get, I think we're going to have to laugh about it.
Well, it's all we can do sometimes, isn't it? Okay,
Yeah.
so if we go back to January then, and we'll just work our way through the year to the
Okay.
major transits that you feel are going to affect us most of all.
Mm-hmm.
So January 19th and 20th are pretty big days.
Yeah. Well, this is the last time that the Sun and Pluto are going to conjunct in Capricorn, and I think, um, I think the relationship between what's happening underneath the surface, and I think the things that are going to be coming up towards the end of the year are really going to be initiated by what's going on in January. Because the first couple weeks in January, it's like it's pretty. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's chill, but there's not as much activity as it is consecutively throughout the year. Like the first like 2 weeks of January are like a regrouping time. It's a great time to just like regroup, reorganize, restructure things. Sun's, in Capricorn, it's time to get Saturn about things, put things in order. Because by the time we start getting into Aquarius season and we get to the 19th and the 20th, the Sun and Pluto are going to conjunct. And then by the time you get to um, January 20th, on that day, Pluto and the Sun both ingress into Aquarius
Together.
together. After the day after Pluto and the Sun conjunct in Capricorn for the last time. And the last time that happened, it's pretty interesting. In 1878 was when the French and the Americans signed the treaty for the French to say they fully support America, and that the French are validating the United States as an official entity in the world, you know. And the French were the ones who really underneath the surface kind of gave us that power. So it was that time when that happened. Um so I think coming into this year we could see some massive like shifts of alliances, but also like there's just there might be some things going on behind the scenes, and even things that we're discovering in our own lives that you know we've kept secret for a long time. Some secrets that we've kind of held in for a while can finally come up to the surface, and like it's like a zit that needs to be popped finally. It's hard to not take the Capricorn shit to the outer realms here, because like I just really think what's going on by the end of the year is being triggered by this conjunction, this final conjunction, as um the Sun and Pluto meet for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but like here we go. So you can see the day after that conjunction, Pluto and the Sun are going to conjunct.
Will they only be together for those couple of days and then the sun moves off?
Well, the Sun, moves a degree a day, but I don't think the day that Pluto and the Sun conjunct officially, things are gonna blow up and bubble up to the surface. I just really think that things are being worked on behind the scenes. You know, we're working on restructuring our own selves behind the scenes. Like we're kind of taking the past 15 years and what we've learned within ourselves and how to restructure our own lives. Um, and get ready for what's coming over the next 20 years, and take that knowledge and know how to build with it, because that's what Capricorn does. That's what Capricorn is teaching us. That's what Saturn in Capricorn in 2020 taught us. It's like no matter what is going on, you know outside of our own world that we can control, like we still have to keep building, we still have to keep growing, we still have to keep learning the hard lessons. And I think this is like one of those final moments where we're kind of facing, the things that we may have buried, we've kept secret within ourselves, maybe so far unconsciously that we've kept our own secrets from ourselves, that we've forgotten, that we've remembered. It's like, wow, like karmically, we really have to face. what we've buried, even within ourselves, not necessarily from other people, but like, this is there are probably things going on in the outer world too that um are being investigated in secret, you know, and being prepared to unleash themselves at the right moment. This is what I'm saying about,
Is this the alien stuff?
I mean, so on January 2019 or January 19th, the Sun and Pluto conjunct in Capricorn. So I think, to me, what that is that there are things going on behind the scenes that are being prepared for what's to come towards the end of the year. But by the time you see Pluto move into Aquarius, this is when we're gonna see more of the AI stuff, more of the alien stuff. It was so weird that when all the alien stuff started popping out last year, when Pluto went to Aquarius, it was just like it was there for a second, and then it went away. It's like we didn't really get any clear information about it, whether it was being used as a distraction or, you found some paper mache aliens in Mexico that it's like, what was that? Like, what was all of that? Like, there was all these press conferences about that stuff. Like, I don't know. Like, that's kind of what we're getting into towards the end of the year. It's like we might, like, with all the Saturn, Pisces, Neptune stuff, and especially November, and with Jupiter and Gemini, squaring Neptune, squaring Saturn. It's like there's gonna be so much propaganda as well. Like with Neptune, like we've seen more propaganda than ever, and with Saturn getting closer to Neptune, it's like the propaganda is at an all-time high. Um, so it's like, what is real? Like, are these aliens even real? Are these like distractions and smokescreen to keep us from not seeing what is actually truly being investigated, which is this 29-degree Capricorn stuff, which there's a lot of opinions about what's going on. Some people say that there's a military tribunals going on about, people in power being put to death or put on trial in secret for crimes against humanity or pedophilia stuff, like things in the higher echelons of the Capricorn world that is actually occurring that we can't see, that they're not going to show us. Because if they did show us, literally society would collapse yesterday. Like if that, like if Hillary Clinton went on trial in public for sex trafficking, I'm pretty sure everything would blow up overnight, right? So is that happening? I maybe. I have a feeling, like, especially with 29 Cap Pluto conjunction before this happens, like I feel like at the beginning of the year there are things going on behind the scenes and in secret that are waiting to be revealed, and it's going to be for the right time at the right moment, and it could be towards that last eclipse in October before the election with that grand cross of Mars opposing Pluto, squaring the eclipses, squaring the nodes. It's like then things start, being utilized to manipulate for what's to come, for their own outcome. On whatever side that is, I don't know, but I do feel like there are things going on behind the scenes, And in our own lives, like I think we're having to face all of our unconscious behaviors that are just kind of revealing themselves, um, in very crazy ways, and that goes along with the whole Chiron thing too. This year is um, the unconscious stuff that's bubbling up is really challenging our self identities, um, and it can be very uncomfortable when things get brought up to the surface that you didn't want to hear, didn't want to face, and but that ultimately was what triggered a healing within you, because at this time too, like Mars is and Mercury's gonna square Chiron before the conjunction. So it's like there's definitely things that we're gonna be hearing that we don't want, that we're not ready for, but we need to hear it anyway, you know, to really prepare for how we're gonna heal ourselves, how we're gonna help other people here heal, and who's gonna take authority to do so.
Then we move on to January 27th when Uranus, which has been retrograde, moves direct.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, anytime Uranus goes direct, I mean, there's some pretty shocking things that happen. And this is, Jupiter's direct. So Jupiter knows it's about to meet with Uranus. So, like, I think, with Mars, Mercury conjunct, and Pluto and Aquarius, and Uranus dispositing Pluto, it's like there could be some shocking revelations that come within our personal lives. And definitely just things that really are forcing us to revolutionize how we think, how we sustain ourselves. I mean, the sun's going to eventually square Uranus and it will be direct. So I think before this Jupiter Uranus conjunction, which is going to be, that's a very benefic, exciting thing, whether it's uncomfortable for some people or not. Like, that's a very exciting transit. But with all this Aquarian energy and Uranian energy, it's like, you got to be prepared for whatever curveballs come at you, because the curveballs are coming, and they might be the kinds of curveballs you never seen before. In fact, they will be for sure. Like, we haven't seen this at all. We haven't seen Pluto and Aquarius in our lives, and especially with Uranus and Taurus. So I think, it's just getting prepared for how things are, you know, shifting and changing towards some new revolutionary way of sustaining ourselves, whether it's with finances or money or even the food system. Like, you really going to eat the bugs? I don't know. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like we got to find different ways to avoid eating these bugs that they are trying to say is like, yeah, this is a great way to get your protein, is eat some bugs. It's like, no, it's like, I've been interested in this myself because I do like to eat meat. I know you're a vegetarian and you don't eat meat, but like, I've seen a lot of people now who are meat eaters, like not going to the store to not buy meat, but like finding private farms to order their meat from. My dad does that actually. Which I found out. I went home a couple weeks ago and he's like, yeah, I've been going down to this farm, about 20, 30 minutes. They're in Missouri. So, there's a lot of land, lots of farm. Um, and he goes and picks up his own meat. He's like, I'm not buying any meat at the store. It's like, to me, this is Uranus going direct, Pluto and Aquarius being disposited by Uranus. It's like, man, finding new ways to, for every aspect of our sustainability, because it's definitely going to be challenged through Aquarius season with Uranus going direct and Aquarius season with Pluto fresh and Aquarius. It's like, man, some big shocks are definitely coming our way. But that's how Uranus tends to work is, it shocks us towards a better future. It's not like Saturn where it's like putting you to the test and it's like, if you don't pass this test, I'm gonna eat you. Like, it's very Uranus. Like, it's like, look, like, I'm gonna have to give you this little kick in the ass, and I'm gonna send you off into a place you never thought you would be, and it's always gonna be better.
It's
I think that's
almost the vision I'm getting is Uranus. Saturn is like being at school and having to sit the exam, whereas
yes.
Uranus is I'm going to throw you in the deep end, and to survive, you have to swim.
Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%.
And then February 13th, we have Moon, Chiron, North Node all conjunct.
So this was something that I thought was interesting because the conjunction of Chiron and the North Node are, which we talked a little bit about, is on the 16th, but the day before, um, the moon is gonna cross Chiron and the North Node. Um, yeah, let's go back here. The moon's gonna cross this point, and I think it's like 'cause the nodes are calculated by the moon. So I think with this conjunction here, and like we were talking earlier, this is a very healing year. We've gone through so much trauma over the past couple years, since Chiron's been in Aries, I think 2018.
Mm.
Um, like there's been so much trauma and it's affected just our individual selves, we see so much confusion with our identity. But I think before this Chiron North Node conjunction is exact, the 3 days before that it is exact, the moon's gonna cross that. And I think there might be some it's like it gets worse before it gets better. That's the best way I could put it. Like days before that Chiron North Node is exact, it's like there might be some really kind of traumatic things that bubble up, definitely personally. I think it's very personal, some very personal things. And it's karmic too. It's the North Node. So this is a very karmic, personal, painful things that are bubbling up before this activation of this new healing that's taking place throughout the year. I think is gonna come up days before that exact conjunction. So I just thought that was an interesting thing when I was looking at, the astrology for the whole year. And I was like, oh wow, like, you know, I think I think that's an important thing to prepare for, is that like whatever days before that exact conjunction comes up, like that is gonna seem to be like giving you the insight or mirroring back to you or reflecting back to you kind of what this theme of what Chiron North Node conjunction is going to be for you. Like this is an Aries, like it's very personal. It's about your identity. It's about yourself, about your true self. Because I think definitely with how things have gone over the past 5 years, I think a lot of what this Chiron Aries has been is losing touch with yourself, whether it's through trauma or through some sort of pain and suffering or through whatever matrix nonsense that's bigger than us, that's outside of us, is how it's affected you. And I think definitely with this moon crossing that before that happens, I think that's like a very like good indicator of where to pay attention to for what this Chiron North Node conjunction is going to be.
And I've got written here February 19th, and it's something conjunct the North Node, but I don't know what it is.
Let's take a look.
Is there something conjuncting the North Node? Is that Chiron?
Yeah, that's the exact conjunction. So we've been saying the 16th.
Yeah.
Yep. So that whole time period of that week, you know,
So people will possibly be really going through it through those days as they're having these revelations.
yeah, for sure. Definitely with that moon right before it's exact. It's like there's some flaring up and some reflection of what that's going to be. And when that Chiron North Node is exact here, like the moon's going to square as well in Cancer.
No, that's all
So
the feels.
it's all the feels. It's all the feels. But the thing is that Pluto is not in Capricorn. That's great. So this it's like we're moving on to a whole new stage here. Like, it's like the sets completely change. Like, when you're changing scenes, like this is a change of scenes. But it's like dealing with these deep emotions that have affected us on a very personal, individual level. And definitely things, I mean, connected to our relationships with our family as well. I think a lot of that's going to come up. Like during this Chiron North Node. It's like, well, I've been on my own path and my own journey, but it's like, wow, like, like I also come from, you know, other people. I'm not just here alone. I didn't just come from nothing. And it's like a remembering of like, wow, like I am an extension of my DNA.
Mm.
Aries can get stuck in that. It's like I'm on my own track, I'm my own self. It's like, well, we are, but you also come from somewhere, you
Well,
know.
it's funny because with Chiron, it's the wounded healer, but I always associate it not only with self because it's our wounds, but I
Mhm.
always think of it as attached to family because so many of our wounds come from our childhood. And it's not to say
Right.
that people have necessarily tried to hurt us, but these things and situations happen. And even if it's our interpretation that something hurt us, if that wasn't somebody's intention, but those wounds are still there. So I always think that they're tied together anyway.
Yeah,
Just
I
my
agree.
opinion. That's not an astrologically based thing. It's just always been my understanding for that reason.
Yeah, psychologically, yeah. I mean, our childhood is our makeup, and it's like, I mean, I guess they say that by the time you're turning 7 to 9 years old, it's like that's when you're in theta state. Like
Mm.
you're just absorbing, you're taking in everything on a subconscious, unconscious level, and you don't have any tools to deal with that. So as you move through your teen years, and definitely by the time you get into your 20s, and by the time you get to your Saturn return, it's like a lot of those lessons, it's like figuring out tools and how to deal with the things you couldn't control because you can't control your childhood. You can't control if you were poor or an abusive home or you were rich and were given everything, but you have no drive and you just take everything for granted. Like it goes both ways, you
Yeah.
know? But we had no control over that. So it's like learning those tools and learning those mechanisms to how to deal with that, and even from people born around my generation, people born with Chiron and Cancer, it's like that's what we deal with a lot, and we're going through a Chiron square right now. So definitely, people born in that Chiron Cancer time period, especially with this North Node conjunction, and when it happens with the Moon in Cancer, it's like that's coming up a lot. Is definitely our relationship with our family and our genetic structure. Um, yeah, we it's the things we didn't have control over. And it's like with this Chiron North Node, it's like learning tools and taking the authority to like learn the tools and want to actually focus on that because it's not always about the things externally, because you get too caught up in the external things, like you miss out on developing the tools to help you deal with all the things that you can't control that you are made of, and we all have that. And wherever Chiron is in your chart, like that's where you'll find that. But yeah, this is pretty interesting with the moon in Cancer here. And then I feel too like because there is this, and I put this in our notes that as we get through February around this Chiron conjunction on the 16th, like there's going to be 5 planets in Aquarius. There's going to be a massive stellium in Aquarius. So as much of this Chiron energy that's coming to the surface and as much difficult emotions or pain that can come up to the surface that's, you know, wanting to heal itself, like I think too, especially with all this Aquarius stuff going on, while that's happening is like also having a certain detachment from that as well to be able to analyze it correctly and intellectually and logically and not just be caught up in the emotions and the feelings of things. Like an Aries or a Cancer would be. It's like they're caught up in the emotion, caught up in the feelings, caught up in the fire, caught up in the waterfall. It's like with this Aquarius stellium, while this is happening, it's giving us the opportunity, especially with Mercury and Cancer, to like, okay, like this is what's coming up. This is what's, you know, these are the feelings that I'm feeling right now. It's like being able to detach and look at it. That's what Aquarius is really good at too. It's being able to like see things um and not actually be the thing, to look at it, to not be the emotion, but to see the emotion. And sometimes that's a challenge too, because sometimes you have to guess like if Aquarius even feels anything at all. But it's like I feel like this is giving us an opportunity as this is occurring to really, you know, take a step back and analyze it and not be too caught up in it as it's happening. And that's kind of a blessing for this transit as well.
And then February 28th, we have Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunct in Pisces with 9 degrees with Venus, Mars squared Jupiter.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Wow. Well, definitely with Venus, Mars squaring Jupiter. I mean, Venus squared Mars or Venus squared Jupiter days before, but it's kind of all happening at once. So definitely, when it comes to our values and our beliefs, like there's massive challenges coming up towards that. But with this Saturn, Sun, Mercury conjunction, like, it's being able to like fall into a place of being able to like kind of channel from that higher spiritual place that Pisces does, and especially with Mercury in Pisces, like Mercury is not happy in Pisces, but Mercury does well in Pisces when it can fall into that place of channeling and into a creative spiritual place. So with this Venus square Jupiter, like there's definitely going to be some massive challenges to our beliefs and this fixed energy of, you know, like I think this, you think that, like, some disagreements, especially with Mars squaring Jupiter with Venus there, over our values or money or, anything related to any of that kind of Taurus Venus stuff, because, Venus, being ruled in the sign of Taurus where Jupiter's at, Venus much rather be where Jupiter's at. And Jupiter would much rather be where Venus is at. So it's like they would they would rather swap. So there could be definitely some disagreements, on a very personal level. Um and it can get a little hot, especially like if you're not willing to change or see things from someone else's perspective, or you just agree to disagree because, at the end of the day, it's like as this is happening with Mercury and the Sun and Saturn, it's like the real lesson and what we're really being taught is to just come from that spiritual place, even when we don't agree on things or when things become too stubborn or too fixed. It's like you have to be willing to change and shift where the tides go and be able to ride the wave and ride the tide and not fall into overthinking or thinking too much or being too analytical about things or too um preachy about things that, Mars, Venus, square Jupiter can be. It's like you just got to be in the flow. You got to be in wherever that inner voice and that inner world is calling you to be. That's what Saturn and Pisces is teaching us to be. And, how to actually reach into that place inside of us that you can just let go and channel from your soul and not be afraid to speak it from a spiritual place. Because with Mars, Venus square Jupiter, it's like, you know, there could be an overabundance of things, spending too much, you know, um, overshooting ideas, having too big of ideas, and those ideas being so big where you're really sure about them and you really think that this is how it should be and this is the way it should be, and when it's really not that way, it's like, Mercury and the sun and Saturn just want us to be able to just move out of that place where we get stuck. Jupiter and Taurus, Uranus and Taurus, it's like you can get stuck very easy. And with other fixed planets squaring all the Taurus energy going on with Jupiter and Uranus, it's like it's very easy to just get stuck. Some people might get stuck, some people might be surfing. So I think for me, I'm gonna try to remain surfing towards the end of February.
I'll try and remain surfing, but just on a personal note, that is all of this is happening right when Neptune is sitting directly on top of my Mars, Mercury, and midheaven.
Yeah.
And anyone that watches me on High Vibe knows that this is a transit that I'm finding really tough, more so because of the Neptune conjuncting my Mars. It's just, I've never felt fatigue and exhaustion like it. And I'm physically fine. It's just, this is what it is. So with all of that going on at the same time, I think February is just going to be so much fun for me.
Surfing.
Right?
You gotta surf.
I just need to wake up first.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So
Surf while you
then
sleep.
if we jump ahead by almost a month, on March 25th, we have the full moon lunar eclipse in Libra. And is this the eclipse that is hitting Mexico, Texas, and the southern border?
Well, I know the one on April
Oh,
8th.
no, that's April 8th. So
I'm
this
not
is
sure where this one's hitting.
sure.
We could look. I mean, if you could pull it up, or yeah. Um,
No, it's right. I've got it in my notes. It's April 8th. The new moon
that's the one happening.
solar that's
Or-
that's hitting Mexico and Texas.
Right. And just like the one in October
Yes.
that we just passed, so it's making the X.
Yes. So
Yeah.
March 25th.
Yeah.
So how is this one going to feel?
Let's back up a little bit. I mean, this is Mercury and Chiron conjunct. This is, we're still going. I see we're still dealing with Chiron here. And I think, it's, you know, not being caught up in weird codependent situations. I think, being caught up in odd codependent relationship stuff, like this is where that stuff's being really rattled, you know. And I think on the other end of things is like people, as we're dealing with this Chiron thing and definitely through these eclipses, it's like people are really coming into their own selves more than ever. I really think that. And I think that this year is what's teaching us to do that through all these eclipses and just all this crazy Chiron shit that's coming up. I mean, I feel like this is the beginning of when people really start coming into their own individual selves more than they have been in the past 5 years. I mean, we're not done with Chiron and Aries, but with the eclipses happening in the middle of it, like I think the second half of Chiron and Aries is when we're going to start seeing people come more into their own selves. And maybe to the extreme, maybe too far as well. But this is the moment where that trigger starts to hit, where it's like, you know what? Like, I don't need to be caught up in this with this person and all these other people and all these other relationships. It's like, I do need to take care of myself. And I'm not completely subscribing to this whole like self-care thing that you hear in the new age world stuff. Of course, self-care is important, but there's this level of selfishness where like I'm just on my own in my own self-care and self-love, blah blah blah. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is like an honest like check of like, you know what? Like I've given too much of myself to other people and I really need to like do good for myself right now. Um I think that's coming up a lot, and especially like we have Venus Saturn conjunction, Mars being Pisces at the time. So like the setting boundaries in relationships, setting boundaries in how we're coexisting, and definitely with codependency. Because to me, Libra and Pisces are the signs in the zodiac that deal with codependency the most. Whether we're dealing with the seventh house or the 12th house, it's like that's where you find the codependent issues, like more than any other place in the chart and any other sign. Because with Pisces, it's like, oh, I just put everybody else first and I don't even see myself, But with Libra, it's like, oh, I'm friends with everybody and I got to please everybody. And I got so many people that I'm so close to, even though I'm not actually that close to them. Like, it's like keep people at arm's length. Aries is very like, when Aries has like friends or like relationships, like they're very like they agree on things or they really just, like aren't afraid to push each other's buttons, to, you know, and that's what an Aries relationship to me is all about. When there's two Aries people together, it's like, like they're not afraid to challenge each other. And that's healthy. Libra is not very good at that. So it's like the Libra people are kind of having to learn how to take the heat right now, so to say, you know, and kind of do things on their own and realize that they don't need 1,000 friends and they don't need 1,000 boyfriends and girlfriends. It's like sometimes you got to do shit on your own. And Venus, Saturn, I think is really important with this too, is that like setting boundaries in relationships, setting boundaries in your creative partnerships to be more responsible, to have healthier boundaries and fulfill a responsibility together. But at the same time, like I think with Venus and Saturn and Pisces, like there is kind of this more spiritually based relationships forming and taking place. Hopefully they're spiritual. Hopefully they're not going too far one way into the religious realm and over exaggerating in that land. It's finding balance, especially with these eclipses. It's like maintaining balance and what the root of that relationship is, whether it's spirituality or how you share your creativity or creative partnerships. It's making plans long term, but also, having solid plans and not having open ended um, ideas that every time you get together, it's like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then you depart and then you're expected to hold up your end and you come back together weeks later and then you just have the same discussion about, oh, like we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Like that happens a lot. And especially with Pisces, it's like, commitment is so important right now and actually following through and not saying things that you don't really mean and being up in the ethers about, what you're saying. Cause this is like an opportunity on this eclipse to really like, you know, have like solid partnerships if you're setting boundaries and knowing where you're getting caught up in the wrong place with whatever friends or relationships or romantic partnerships or business or creative partnerships or even what you're sharing spiritually or religiously, whatever you are. Like, I think that's what this eclipse is all about. And obviously the healing aspect with Chiron.
And then in between the two eclipses, we have Mercury retrograde, which we've already talked about. That's the
Yeah.
one in Aries.
Yeah.
And then so April 8th is the new moon eclipse, which is 19 degrees of Aries. And this is the one, like we've already said, that's hitting Mexico and Texas and the southern border.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is, where it kind of gets beyond personal here. I mean, Mars and Saturn conjunct. There's definitely some tension here, and I think the tension is underneath the surface on this eclipse. And this is the same eclipse that we just went through with all the stuff that happened in the Middle East, and this is the mirror of that, right? So whatever this is going to look like, it's definitely going to be intense. It's Chiron is involved as well. Mercury's retrograde. So there might be things about what just happened over this last October that might be revealed, things coming out, words being said that, it's like things we didn't know about, truths about what just happened. Um, I mean, yeah, this eclipse is super intense. Venus is going to be in Aries by that time. But I think this Mars Saturn too. It's like there's definitely, and with the Mercury retrograde on this eclipse, Mars and Saturn, Mercury retrograde. It's like there's a lot of tension, and there's things that were unsaid that are definitely coming out, and things from this last eclipse, October 2023. Like there's this kind of mirroring effect of that whole time period. And I don't want to say that it's gonna, be another major traumatic event like that. I don't want to say that, but at the same time, like with the something, I mean, obviously with that eclipse in October going through Texas on the border, and then this one making next right through it, it's like something in that area is going down.
Well, X
Something.
always does mark the spot, doesn't it?
It does. And I mean, we had that eclipse in October, the first one that went through the border in Texas, but the second eclipse, November 5th, 2023, we had just a few weeks back. I mean, that one went straight through the Middle East, and that's just wherever these eclipses are actually being visible and actually occurring is, I mean, there's obviously going to be some effect in that area. So, whatever that's going to be, maybe there's a conflict at the border, maybe something with SpaceX in Texas or Elon Musk X everything. I don't know. Twitter X. I mean, it's Mercury retrograde. This is a good point. I mean, maybe things on the internet, like maybe through X, could be revealed. I mean, oh man, did you see what he did the other day, by the way? Like, he was just like,
Which thing? He's
go
been on
fuck
fire.
yourself.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Like, it seems like underneath the surface, there's some kind of conflict or war going on, whether it's just verbally or whatever, but there's more to the whole picture going on,
And I
right?
just need to say on the whole Elon Musk saying go fuck yourself to Disney that was directed at,
Yep.
they have lost I want to say it's 196 billion. In I don't know if that's in recent times or as a result of that, but apparently there was a spate of people canceling everything related to Disney in terms of streaming and what have you, and they
Mhm.
lost a considerable amount of money
Yep.
when Elon exposed what they were doing. So there is a war. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but I think you're absolutely correct that it is a war. And I think there are wars being fought on many different planes.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's Mercury and Aries. So Aries meaning war, Mercury meaning communication, technology. It's like technological war, whether it's with words, Mercury, like it's conflict, and Mercury and Aries is not afraid to speak on a level of conflict and take on conflict and whatever. So it's like that whole thing with Musk the other day where he's just like, go fuck yourself. Do I make myself clear? Ha ha ha. Like that's very aggressive, So like this whole eclipse here is like this is a very aggressive verbal eclipse, so to say, and I mean the whole Mercury retrograde period. But yeah, Mars and Saturn too, like I just think there's more underneath the surface that's going to be revealed. Once again, I think 2024, like that is a common theme throughout the year, is just things being revealed. I mean, we've been saying this since Neptune's been in Pisces, and slowly throughout the 2010s, we've seen things come to the surface. We've seen lots of deception and propaganda and manipulation and subconscious kind of fuckery, like 2024 really is that year where there's so much that's been bubbling up, and this is definitely a tipping point. And this eclipse is a tipping point.
So then on April 10th, we've got the exact Mars Saturn conjunction at 14 degrees. And then 10 days later is when we have the Uranus Jupiter conjunction in Taurus.
Yep.
So those sort of happen quite quickly. And then if we jump ahead to May 2nd, Pluto goes retrograde until October 11th. So
Yeah.
will we feel, Pluto being the furthest out planet, will we feel it the same way we feel the Uranus when it goes direct or retrograde?
Put it this way, this wasn't Pluto going direct, but when you're talking about feeling an outer planet in real time, in 2008, it was literally like the moment Pluto went to Capricorn. The banking system failed. $700 billion gets pulled out. The whole thing. The UK system crashes. It was like, I think it was September 2008, and then by October, and things happen pretty quick. But it's always at the 0 degrees points and the 29-degree points. So that's what we're dealing with is 29 Capricorn, the 0 degrees Aquarius. So this is when we do feel those things the most, and this is, Pluto's made it to 2 degrees. In 2023, when Pluto went to Aquarius for the first time, it only made it to 1 degree. So this is the first time we're feeling 2 degrees of Pluto and Aquarius. So
this is a retrograde, the last one where we will see Pluto retrograde into Capricorn in our life. And then once it goes direct, that's it.
That's it. That's it. Officially.
A question about that, going retrograde to 29 degrees, because we know that the 29th degree of any sign is always the most extreme, and 0 degrees because it's obviously coming into a new sign. With Pluto going back into Capricorn for the last time, only making it to 29 degrees, should we be expecting massive shakeups and shock in regard to Pluto in Capricorn, or is this more a tying up of loose ends before it moves off?
Yeah, I think it is more tying up of loose ends, things that have been buried underneath the surface during this Pluto Capricorn transit since 2008, bubbling up. It's the final showdown. It's a boss battle. If you're trying to fight Bowser, once you get to the end of Mario, like you got to beat Bowser. Like this is you trying to like knock Bowser off the fucking platform. Like this is the final showdown. And I think going back to January 19th, 2024 and January 20th, when we saw the sun and Pluto conjunct at 29 degrees, like I just think like there are so many things going on underneath the surface that we cannot see. That's Pluto. Pluto is the underworld. It's like, you can't really see down there, and it's like once Pluto goes direct and it gets into that last time of retrograding through Capricorn, it's like things are going to be popping up out of nowhere the whole time. And by the time you get through the election, Pluto's going to be in Capricorn during that time. And that the eclipse in October, with that grand cross with Mars opposing Pluto, squaring the nodes. Like, I just really think that this is like a final showdown, of an old structure that's holding on for dear life, that doesn't want to let go, you know, whether it completely collapses, I don't know. I'm not here to say that that's what's going to happen. But I do know that things are going to get revealed. People are going to see and know shit that they didn't know. But then they already knew but couldn't accept. There's going to be things that are going to be hard to accept for people. I mean, some people are going to be like, "Ah, I told you so." Some people are going to be like, "Ah." But honestly, since COVID and the whole fucking thing, like more people have waken up to what is about to happen anyway, because it is going down. It is going down, and then all these other events that have been going down are not isolated. Like
No,
whether
and there are a lot of people that have said, COVID's over, life's back to normal. And for some people, if you try and say, well, no, all these things are going on in the background,
Mhm.
they sort of say, no, 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 everything's fine. So will it be hard for everybody as all of these systems fall apart, or will the people that have been aware of it know that it's coming? Will they manage to navigate things a little easier because they don't have the shock value attached to it?
Right, the shock value thing is definitely a very Aquarian thing, but maybe this what you just said to me brings up this Chiron North Node. Maybe the people who are already prepared and kind of see things, and can see the difficult truths and things that are uncomfortable. Maybe, just so maybe that these are the ones who are going to be helping the people who aren't necessarily ready accept these things, and
Mm.
using our um kind of whatever the word is, our awareness to the naive to help them, because it's gonna be wild. It doesn't mean like life's over or society's over, this and that. It's like, no, things are gonna get much better once we get through Pluto and Aquarius for sure. Once we start getting into it,
I was
but
going
this
to
is
say,
the
once it's over, that's 20 years.
oh yeah, no, I mean like as we're going through it, I think
Right.
like it's like there are gonna be you know much more liberating times, instead of this kind of constricting Capricorn, Saturn, um, kind of feeling, I mean, I felt that. I don't know. I think a lot of people actually did feel that. And I heard other astrologers say this. I heard other people in the spiritual community talking about Pluto and Aquarius, at the beginning of 2023 in February and March. I felt it. Like I felt a whole new sense of liberation. I felt like it was easier to just take the curveballs, accept the curveballs, know that they're coming, prepare for them. With Saturn and Capricorn, it's much harder because you want to be like fixed and rooted in your foundation and not move. It's like, well, the mountain's about to move. There's going to be an avalanche. If we're going to be surfing with Neptune at the beginning of the year, it's like we're going to have to snowboard through this avalanche, get down the hill, So it's like, get ready for some ultimate extreme sports in 2024.
Whether you want it or not. So
Yeah.
then on May 18th, we've got Sun, Jupiter conjunct Venus and Uranus. So a Venus and Uranus conjunct?
So it is going to
I'm
happen.
confused by my notes.
It is going to happen. So, yes, Venus and Uranus are conjunct the same day that the Sun and Jupiter are conjunct. I think this is probably one of the best days of the year. I'm just going to say this. I think this is one of the most benefic, exciting days of the year. I would put this as the best day of the year.
Okay, so May 18th, everybody make a note.
Yeah. And we talked about Jupiter and Gemini. Like, we're not going to see the Sun and Jupiter conjunct in Gemini because right after this, just days later, Jupiter goes right to Gemini. The Sun goes to Gemini, and we're not going to see them come together at the same degree. So, this is an incredibly benefic time, and this is after Jupiter and Uranus conjunct. So, like it's funny how transits work. Like sometimes it's just like on the date, or sometimes it's before in the build up, or sometimes it's days or weeks or months later. It's like, pretty much a month later, like 28 days later, literally, Venus and Uranus conjunct, the Sun Jupiter conjunct after the Uranus Jupiter conjunction. So I think today, whatever we've been working towards during this Jupiter and Taurus and whatever we've been manifesting, I guess we can get into the manifesting aspect of Taurus and Jupiter, because Taurus is the master manifester. And with the Sun and Jupiter conjuncting in Taurus at 28 degrees, which is almost the final degree, it's a lot different than it conjuncting at 2 degrees. You know, at the beginning stages, it's like this is like the final stage of Jupiter being in Taurus, and the Sun's going to be there. Venus is going to be with Uranus. Like, whatever you've been really working on and manifesting, like, this is the moment where like, overnight, the plants just seem to, you know, sprout and evolve to its most beautiful state, like, really fast. Because with Venus and Uranus, it's going to be really fast. Like, you know, we might see some crazy shit with crypto. Like, you remember a couple years ago when the whole GameStop thing happened with
Yes.
crypto, and like all of a sudden these like 17-year-old kind of nerdy video game kids who really will, thought they would never be anything in their life became rich overnight. Like, this is that kind of energy, but it's also with Uranus and Venus being there. But it's not just sudden wealth or sudden manifestation. It's like with Taurus, it's like you've been working and building on something for a long time, at least for a year, or at least since 2011, the last time we saw Jupiter in Taurus.
That's huge.
This is the biggest day. This is the biggest. I mean, Jupiter is the biggest planet. This is the biggest day. And to top that off with Venus and Uranus conjunct, like at the degrees, Venus and Uranus at 23 degrees, and Jupiter and the Sun at 28. I mean, this doesn't happen often. This is exciting. This is fucking awesome. We can sit here and talk all day about how crazy shit's going on in the world, but like, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, like, we are in control of our own destiny and manifesting our own destiny. And Mars on the North Node too, and I know that's on our
So the next
list here.
day, May 19th, is when Mars and the North Node conjunct
Yeah. So I
properly.
mean, we could just talk about that along with it, because like it's like we're pushing towards our own destiny. Like, and this is a karmic play out here with Mars here. Whatever you've been manifesting and growing and really slowly nurturing and farming, and this is the harvest here. This is when you reap. And this is so powerful, especially with Mars and the North Node. It's like this karmic, like, action. Like, I made this shit happen. Like, this was my creation, and it's beautiful. Like, it's Taurus, of course it's going to be beautiful. And it's big. Whatever it is, it's big. So
And
if
it's
you have,
happening in spring, at the end of spring.
yeah. So if you have planets here, which I do, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm excited about this one. I'm so stoked. My Sun's at 14. My Venus is 20 degrees of Taurus. My rising is 29 Taurus. Like, this is my time. So if you have anything in this area, good for you. And this is that Mars North Node's on your Sun as well. So
Yes, it is.
yeah.
I don't think I've got anything in Taurus.
No, but you're going to have Jupiter cross your rising very shortly after that, which is amazing. I mean, all the 12th house stuff, it's like, you've been doing so much spiritual work and work behind the scenes. And it's like, once Jupiter crosses your rising, it's like, oh, you're launched back out into the world, I mean, think about like 2012, what that was, 2011 going into 2012.
It was an interesting time for me. It was a wonderful time.
That's good.
But it's funny. It feels like a whole different lifetime ago, completely different chapter. You know how books, they've got chapters and some books have parts? So
Mm-hmm.
you might have part 1, part 2, part 3, and then within all of them, you have obviously the chapters.
Yep.
I feel like it was a separate part of the book.
Right. I got a question.
Yes.
So I agree with what you just said totally. But do you feel that before 2011 and 2012 that the timelines were so different every decade and every 12 years compared to the last 10 to 12 years? If I made any sense at all.
No, you've made sense. I'm contemplating the question. It's really interesting because there are different parts of my life that do feel completely different. So I feel like every 12 years could be a whole separate part
Mhm.
within that book. You know, who I was, and I look back at videos and photos and I know her and I know exactly what she was feeling, but I feel like somebody completely different.
Mhm.
And we could have a whole conversation just about
Yeah, yeah.
why I think that. But I almost feel as if there has been a timeline jump, shift, something. And the best way I can describe it so that people can imagine it or visualize it is I feel that if we've been part of a video game and then, you know, we're going along, we're playing the game and everything's going fine. And then whoever's in control of the controllers has at one point gone, this is boring. Let's see how wild we can make it. And they're throwing everything into it.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like 2020 started. And there's been a shift there, but that's not the 12-year cycle, but maybe it is in terms of those timelines.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, for sure. 'Cause I definitely feel like once 2011 and 2012 hit and when Neptune went to Pisces, and that was also like we talked at the beginning of the show, it's like, the precession of the equinox, went to Aquarius for the next 2,500 years. It was like when I look back to 2012, it's like it, to me, I've heard other people say this too. It's like from 2012 and before, it was one way. And even when you look at the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, it was like culture itself was in this like, evolution of like every decade it was this new thing, and like
Yes.
if you were a part of it, you can map it out in your head perfectly. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like once 2012 hit, it was just like that went out the window totally. And now it's just like a level playing field completely. And with Pluto and Aquarius, it's like the playing field's totally level.
So let me ask you this question. I'm going to ask the question, but then I'm going to go back and say something else before you actually
Mhm.
answer. When
Yeah.
did your spiritual evolution begin? Because as you're talking about these timelines, I keep going back to astrology, and all of that probably really started becoming a thing for me in 2011. But I say this with these facts first, that I grew up in a household where astrology, spirituality, not necessarily organized religion, were a part of my life. We were exposed to mediums and psychics and people
Yeah.
that had different gifts. And I'm so grateful for that I had this exposure, but also I was taught to be not cynical, but not to just believe everything I heard. But
Yeah.
you
Critical
know,
thinking.
it's about finding people that resonate and all of that. We were meditating, we were doing all of these things, and that was always a part of my life. But 2011 was when, I think it was 2011 when I discovered the Leo King, and I was following his astrology. And that was what really got me beyond the point of reading sun sign horoscope. So, I'm an
Yep.
Aries. So, what does that mean for today? I started gaining an understanding of what the planets were doing each and every day and how they were moving and how that affected us as a collective. And I would sort of parrot that information to people around me. And that was how I started to understand astrology properly. And I think the evolution has continued. So the spiritual journey really for me began at that time frame that you're talking about. And I feel like that's coming sort of full circle for me.
Wow. That's crazy because both of our risings are similar. So when we both experienced Jupiter in the 12th house, I think it is that revisiting of that spiritual expansion.
Mm.
Is your rising is 8 degrees Gemini?
It's 11 degrees.
Because what I'm correlating to that is like, like it was 2011 when it all started connecting for me as well. I mean, and it's amazing to hear your upbringing because I was brought up no different.
Mm.
Um, Astrology was a massive part of my mother and father. My mother was the one who introduced me to astrology. My dad was the one who helped me utilize and integrate it into my life. I started learning in 2003 when I was 12 years old. And it's a whole other story. I don't know if we want to go into it on here, but it's like, you know, it was a part of my life from day one. My mother was very deep into many forms of occult and esoteric spiritual practices, and in a very intense way. Lots of stories. My mother passed away when I was young, so, I always had this connection to my mother through the other side. And when I was introduced to astrology from my father, who showed me a book called Heaven Knows What, it's a very popular, famous astrology book. And I got in trouble in school, and he sat me down and made me read for Moon and Sagittarius, which is my moon sign. And for some reason, astrology was a good form of discipline that day. And like, I read the book I read for Moon and Sag in the book, and it blew my mind. Resonated with it immensely. Just it blew my mind. And as I started going through the book is really old. And like there's my mother's handwriting in the book. And like in the Heaven Knows What book, there are blank charts in there, right? So she had charts written out and her handwriting was all through it. And like I don't even know the sound of her voice. So seeing her handwriting was this like amazing thing to me, because I know what my father's handwriting looks like. I know what my grandmother's handwriting looks like. Like, it's an imprint. It's a fingerprint. So to see that, that also blew my mind. So there was this connection, and from that moment on, like I was in my room on my computer researching astrology. By the time I'm in 8th grade, 9th grade, like I understood all the signs, blah blah blah. Didn't understand the whole picture or even really the astronomy of things. Um, but it was 2011 for me as well, with Jupiter in Taurus and Jupiter in my 12th, just like you at that time when it all started connecting and the pieces started really coming together and understanding the bigger picture and how it actually functions on an astronomical level and understanding the cycles and the transits and correlating that with what I know about history, because I've always loved history and I have a great memory about history. And it's like, yeah, it was just this explosion. And definitely when I found David's work in 2012, like was a massive influence on my life and many other astrologers. But yeah, it was that 2011, 2012 time when it all just, and I think Neptune and Pisces had a massive deal, and a massive hand in that as well. Because that's what I noticed around me in 2011 and 2012 was that it wasn't just me, like experiencing that vibration. Like there was so many people around me, friends and family, who they were feeling different, you know, spiritually with their perception and perspective of the world, you know. And yeah, I think psychedelics had a big part of that as well. Like, because that's when you saw, like, when Neptune went to Pisces, you saw the whole music festival thing blow up, and now you know what it is now. Um, Even people started questioning, you know, the institutions and the health system and the health institution, and eating healthy became a fad. And I mean, we made a joke about it earlier about the coconut oil and all that. Like, to me, I associate that with that time period of when that shifted, and it was really noticeable everywhere. I mean, we could go on about that forever.
Right.
I have so much to talk about that time period of those 2 years, 2011 and 2012. And whenever I listen to other astrologers and, um, other people who are doing spiritual work, like, a lot of people have a lot to say about that time period, about those 2 years specifically. And here we are again, with Jupiter and Taurus and Venus, Uranus conjunct in Taurus. This is just so magical, and it's amazing to see how the last 12 years of that evolution, um, is starting to wrap up, and how we're taking that forward now. Like, it's really exciting. This is really exciting.
And so then we've got Jupiter ingressing into Gemini, and that's
Yep.
on May 25th.
Boom.
There it is.
But it's not gonna meet with the sun. It's so interesting because, like, this whole time period, 2 through May and June this year, like, Venus is gonna be with the sun, eventually Mercury's gonna catch up there as well. Oh, yeah, it was June 4th. Oh, the new
June
moon, the
4th or
Gemini
June
new moon.
6th? Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, Venus, and new moon.
Yeah. So, yeah, as we got the Venus Cazimi too with the sun on Aldebaran too. Like, this is powerful. Like, this is a great day too. Like, as we're coming through this Taurus season into Gemini season with Jupiter and the sun and Venus, and like, there's so much powerful manifesting energy going on to really, like, bring, like, your ideas and even just hopes and wishes and, all these things. Like, this is aside from all the crazy shit going on in the world, because, like, with Aldebaran, like, this is like real, well, like, like, people being born on this day, 2024, with this Venus sun and Jupiter right there, Mercury Uranus coming off that Jupiter Uranus. I mean, this is like, these are some powerful people being born at this time, powerful people to really make a massive impact in the world, on some, you know Archangel Michael kind of stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people being born at this time, and even the work being done and what's being communicated at this time. Like, this is coming from some angelic source, whether, like, people are coming into massive wealth or massive healing, or really, like, being present in people's lives to make massive shifts in people's lives, or, like, almost like something popped up in my mind where it's like like, you're walking down the street and you're having a horrible day, and a homeless guy just says the right thing to you. You know what I mean? You see that in movies where it's just like everything's all wrong in the world of this guy who's got everything he wants and needs, and then he's walking down the street, and just somebody who has absolutely nothing says the right thing to him and just changes his whole life and his whole perspective. Like, that's kind of what I see with this Venus Sun conjunction with Aldebaran, and, like, Jupiter getting close to that. It's just like this, like, wow, like, I really didn't think that this would pull through, and it did. At the right time, there at the right moment. This is like, be at the right place at the right time. This is one of these moments. And when we go to that new moon, what's happening? Oh, yeah, then we got the Venus Cazimi on the 4th, and then we got that new moon the next 2 days after that. Yeah, on the 5th. So the new moon on the 5th with the sun. This whole April, May, June time is just a magical time of 2024. I mean, there's going to be, square to Saturn. Venus is getting ready to square Saturn. Sun's going to square Saturn, and then the moon will square Saturn right after the new moon. So, like, you know, things can get a little weird and a little funky, but at the same time, it's like, we talked about this earlier, like, if you're remaining neutral and staying level-headed and seeing things from both sides, with Jupiter and Gemini, like you're gonna be all right. You're gonna make it through, and you're gonna be able to reap the benefits of all this benefic energy that we're experiencing through May and June. It's pretty amazing.
And it's nice to know that when we're going to have a chaotic end to the year, that there are these beautiful moments in the
Yes,
middle of it to just
absolutely.
kind of remind us that everything is going to be okay. It always comes
Hmm.
back to being okay.
Yes, it always does. And on this new moon too, like I see like Mars is at the same degree that Mercury went retrograde as well 2 months prior. So at 27.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like definitely things that were being communicated and ideas that were being thought of that didn't quite follow through, that may have seemed to not stick. Definitely on this new moon, like I think out of nowhere, like those kinds of, latent, delayed things that Mercury retrograde can seem to bring, or delayed thoughts or delayed ideas, you know, I think can really start to kick into gear through this new moon as well. Um, and it's really pushing us towards like, this new individual identity. Now that like we've gone through this North Node Chiron, Mars is past Chiron, this new moon in Gemini. We've gone through some massive transits. I think this new moon in Gemini is going to be a big one for just really like kicking all these latent ideas that you thought were delayed or didn't work out, or you were so impatient that you maybe overshot and just kind of got fed up with, and went full Aries and just like, whatever, I'll move on to the next thing. It's like I think things are gonna come back up, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, and then it's gonna go full force, and it's go time. This new moon is definitely like the go time. It's approaching the second half of the year, approaching the solstice. So I think like it's really, really, really go time. I mean, Mars is gonna go to Taurus, so things might slow down a little bit. Mars is pretty slow in Taurus. So this is definitely the time where you want to move quick, move fast, make things happen quickly, take advantage of all the Gemini energy where things are happening very quickly and rapidly and ADHD like. So May and
And
June are awesome.
and then June 17th, we've got Venus Mercury conjunct 0 degree of Cancer.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this is right before the solstice here. So with Venus and Mercury in Cancer, I think this goes back to like what we were talking about with that Chiron North Node conjunction of like getting down to the foundation of like where we come from. It's like, like we're starting to feel more secure in that, and the discomforts and the things that were seeming to be painful when those kinds of thoughts and ideas and emotions were coming up at the beginning of the year. Like this is the moment where it's like, our thoughts in our minds and our hearts and our guts, and our instincts and our intuition and our values and our partnerships with, the people we're close to and what makes us feel safe is starting to really feel more secure and feel more aligned, like Pluto's not in Capricorn while this is happening, so like this is the first time where we're seeing Venus and Mercury speak to each other and kind of come together and create this like powerful connection without Pluto and Capricorn, like challenging it. So this is like a whole new wave, like a whole new timeline for Cancer energy, I think. And this is kind of setting the tone, and like, like our thoughts and our minds and our emotions are seeming to be in sync at this point. And this is days before the solstice as well.
On June 29th, we have Saturn going retrograde in Pisces, and it will not go direct until November 15th, which is after the election.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is this retrograde going to be as jarring as some of the others?
Not really. I mean, Saturn retrograde is like, Uranus goes retrograde. It's like massive shocks. I don't think so. I've never personally felt a Saturn retrograde like hit right away. I mean, Saturn's slow, takes time to really feel its effects anyway. But I think this one's interesting because, we had that, Venus. We're gonna have that Venus and Virgo opposite Saturn, you know, this year, and that's really bringing up, some interesting situations and reflections and mirror points in relationships. But as Saturn goes retrograde here, like Juno is going to be opposite Saturn. So I think when Saturn is retrograde this year, the amount of Virgo oppositions that it's going to have, and I know, Juno's not a planet, it's an asteroid, but I think still, like, Juno is Jupiter's wife. Venus is all about relationships, so we're having a Juno opposition to Saturn retrograde. We're gonna have a Venus and Virgo opposition to Saturn retrograde. So there is this theme throughout the year when it comes to relationships and partnerships and even marriage partnerships. It's like this is really putting to the test like what relationships are solid and grounded, and what are they clean? Do these relationships have clean slates, or are these karmic relationships that are playing out over and over, or are these relationships that are being held like on these subconscious kind of, frequencies that aren't necessarily visible, that are built on like your kind of subconscious patterns that you've been developing since your childhood that you're not aware of, or you're not in control of? It's like this is kind of where these oppositions to Saturn are kind of showing themselves on the relationship side of things here this year. So, you know, things can get kind of sloppy. That's what I've noticed with Saturn and Pisces. Like when it's direct, we're kind of cleaning things up, but when it goes retrograde, it's like things get sloppy and messy, and like, you know, you forget about things. You're not on top of things as much as you want to be. You say, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," and then the next day it's like, "Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. It's fine." Like, and you lose this concept of time. Like this is an issue with Saturn and Pisces, is that Saturn is the time lord, and Pisces can't deal with time at all. Pisces can't deal with reality. Saturn's all about reality and time and structure, and you got to be here at this time. And Pisces is just like, well, I just need to be free. I don't need the boundaries of time, like, to function in the way I need to function. So when it comes to relationships that are not functioning with healthy boundaries to keep things clean and keep things in order and keep things in check, like, it's going to be a big challenge. But the good news is, I mean, we're going to have Venus trining Saturn when it's retrograde. That's great. And then the sun's going to trine Saturn. So there's this warmth coming through with this Saturn retrograde, at least at the beginning of it, before we get to Leo season, where it's like, okay, like, I know you know, what relationships are valuable to me in my life, and what relationships make me feel secure and comfortable and make me feel protected, with Venus and Cancer, trining Saturn. But it's like this, you got to clean up the mess a little bit. Virgo opposition, Venus will be in Virgo later on, opposing. It's like, you got to keep it clean.
And then July 2nd, we have Neptune go retrograde, and Neptune doesn't go direct until December 7th. And that's all happening in Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've already talked about what Pisces is doing to me personally.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is Neptune's going retrograde days after Saturn goes retrograde in Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have two massive outer planets retrograde in Pisces. So it's just like, things, you know, I'll say this. Neptune's a little different, in my opinion, with retrograde. Like, like when Saturn goes retrograde, it's like there are delays. Like there can be more delays. Things can slow down. There are more obstacles and challenges to overcome. But with Neptune in Pisces going retrograde, and what I've noticed definitely through the past however many years now, how long have we been here? 13 years. we've been dealing with Neptune and Pisces. It's like when Neptune's direct, it's like that spiritual frequency is so high. It's almost like, you taking a bunch of psychedelics or something, and Neptune's direct. And what it seemed like when I think about it, it's like Neptune going retrograde in Pisces has been like, okay, that really, really high frequency of that spiritual current kind of like shuts down a little bit, and all of a sudden reality comes into focus a little more. So that's kind of a good thing, in my opinion, because with Neptune and Pisces, it's like, great, we are channeling a spiritual vision and the vision of the future, and all these amazing ideas, and whether they're real or not, it's amazing. But sometimes we need to slow down and come back down to earth and make sure that reality is what it seems to be. It's like that's kind of what Neptune retrograde has been about with Neptune and Pisces. So, but with Saturn there too, like there's a massive test, and Saturn's getting closer to Neptune, and it's the biggest spiritual test that we'll ever go through in our lives because we won't see Saturn, Neptune conjunct in Pisces again.
No, because they won't conjunct until 2026 and it'll be in
Right.
Aries.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 0 degrees.
It's 0 degrees, and it'll the North Node will be very close in Pisces as well. So like there
Ah,
is this karmic thing playing out, and I think it does go back to 2012. And I'm glad we got to talk about 2012 and our personal experiences, because like to see the culmination of that is going to be pretty amazing, because we just got to talk about our personal experience of the culmination of the past 12 years of Jupiter coming back around through Taurus. So like, we're at Neptune at 29 degrees, the final degree. So by the time, Saturn and Neptune conjunct, the North Node will have crossed Saturn and Neptune, and it will be this kind of like, it'll be amazing to see how the past 15 years, will have played out, and how our spiritual growth will have evolved um, at that point, because I think with Neptune and Aries, I'm calling it the rise of the spiritual warrior, so to say, because as much Neptune as you've been going through and dealing with, like, still gonna cross our suns.
mm-hmm.
It's a different vibe. I'm excited to feel what Neptune and Aries is gonna be, though.
I'm not bothered by Neptune crossing my sun because doing a lot of reading, because I found this Mars Neptune transit so
Mhm.
difficult. Mars, Neptune hitting everything else hasn't bothered me so much, but the
Mhm.
the the Mars Neptune conjunction has been horrible, and so then I started to freak out and thought, oh, what's it going to be like on my sun? And so I
Mhm.
started doing reading about those conjunctions, and for someone like me who has such a strong sense of self, I'm actually not afraid of it because
Yeah.
from what I was reading, if you don't have a strong sense of self, it can be a really rough transit. But if you know who you are and you understand, it should be a much easier transit to move through, which I kind of go, okay, I just need to get through this Neptune Mars thing and I'm good.
Mhm.
Neptune can hit everything else. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't think it hits anything for quite some time for me. So then we go to July 12th. We have Venus opposed Pluto.
Can we? Well, it's great because Venus opposed Pluto, but the day that Neptune's going retrograde,
Mm-hmm.
and before Venus opposes Pluto in Aquarius, when Venus ingress into Leo, the day Neptune goes retrograde, Mercury ingresses into Leo, and then on the third, the next day, Mercury is gonna oppose Pluto, and then Venus will go to Leo and then oppose Pluto right after that. So we can just talk about that as a bundle here, because it's like all this Mercury energy every time. for the next 20 years when planets come into Leo, like they got to face Pluto now, you know. So there is this kind of like, oh shit, like, meeting of the minds or reflecting of the minds of like, we got to come to a common ground here, and like our thoughts are really being challenged by, I mean, the ego parts of ourselves and like how we want to see the highest version of ourselves, and even our heart and, our the love within ourselves and the love within our minds is being challenged by like, well, it's like sometimes you got to really detach from things to really like, you know, let things transform. And it's like this mental transformation is starting to take place, on a creative level and on a level of what love is and how our minds and our hearts are connected. And we're going to start seeing how Mercury and Pluto are transforming um, what those states are going to be over the next 20 years. And then, yeah, like I think that comes back to what day was that again? The
Venus
13th?
opposed Pluto, the
Yeah,
12th.
the 12th.
So just a quick question about Pluto being in Aquarius and opposing Leo. How are these Leo suns? Well, how does it feel to go through a Sun Pluto opposition?
Sun Pluto opposite. I mean, I don't
So
know
all the Leo
person.
suns.
Yeah, I can imagine, it's very challenging. I mean, that's got to be the hardest thing for a Leo sun to go through. Especially like realizing like, wow, like I have to see outside of myself. If I'm gonna evolve and transform, because Pluto is all about evolution, transformation, mutating, a transformation. It's the alchemy. Pluto rules the real alchemy of our soul, and I think for Leo people, like they have to be willing to transform and evolve and grow outside of themselves. And it always comes back too, like when you really see and look and give outside of yourself, it always comes back tenfold. But if you're too stuck in yourself, and I mean, that's the thing about Leo is as great as they are in their own creative imagination and their own ability to just love and create uninhibitedly. This is definitely the most challenging time for them. So it's like, they're two fixed signs. It's not being stuck in that place of I don't need anybody. I'm better on my own. This and that. It's like this is where the real transformation for Leos begin.
Mm.
And I think too, like you go back to the 50s, the 40s and the 50s and the 60s before Pluto, you know, went to Virgo. Well, really the 40s and the 50s, but all of those people born with Pluto and Leo were the ones who shaped what modern culture, pop culture was on a creative, artistic level. The love revolution in the 60s. Those were the people born in the 40s. The teenagers and the 20-year-olds in the 60s were the ones who were born in the 40s with Pluto and Leo coming out of World War II. So, I mean, we're on the opposite end of that. Now it's like technology and aliens and crazy shit. It's like the world has changed so dramatically. Even if you look at pop culture and what art and music is, and even look at the state of like love and relationships, like it's a whole different world compared to the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. Like it's, sending DMs on your cell phone on Instagram or swiping right on whatever app, you know? Like it's a whole different world. We're in the opposite end of what that and honestly, I look at like the Pluto Sag kids right now. I think they're interesting because I work with a lot of kids from that era actually. And I have a great time with them and I do a lot of great things with those kids from that generation, but what I will say is I grew up in the 90s. I love the 90s. I love the 60s. But these Pluto Sag kids who are, late teens, early 20s, like they really are recreating and mimicking what that Pluto and Leo generation laid out. Like it's like they're holding on to that way of the way the world was, and they weren't even a part of it. They had nothing to do with it. They were just babies at the very end of it because it was once 2011 and 2012 rolled in, it was like that world just seemed to dissolve, with Neptune and Pisces year after year after year until we get to here with Pluto and Aquarius. Now it's just like that whole world doesn't seem like it's here at all, you know? And even a lot of those artists and rock stars from that era, like it's like their final time, like the Rolling Stones just made like their final record. I'm pretty sure Paul McCartney is like gonna do his last tour soon, I would imagine. I don't know how Keith Richards is still alive.
I don't think anybody knows how he's still alive.
You know what I mean? It's just like that world is that it's over,
Mm.
Ozzy Osbourne just like had a massive medical emergency and he's probably not gonna ever tour again. Like it's done. So now it's like the Leo energy has to adjust to what this new vibration is going to be with Pluto and how that's going to evolve and how it's going to transform. So, I mean, there's so much we could go on about that for the next 10 hours, but
So then July 15th, Mars Uranus conjunct 26 degrees of Taurus with the moon in Scorpio opposition.
I think, all these things that were happening in May and June with all this Uranus energy and this Taurus, Venus conjunct Uranus with that Sun Jupiter conjunction. Yeah, I mean, the moon opposing Mars Uranus. I think those things are kicking into gear. I think that manifestation is starting to kick into gear. We might see some, pretty intense, maybe some conflicts arise that day with the moon opposing Mars on Uranus, just out of nowhere, just like, but we also might see some jackpot energy just out of nowhere, just bam, like I think this is a day and these next couple days around this time is like you expect the unexpected. Some of the most amazing things might pop out of nowhere, but some of the darkest shit also might pop out of nowhere with that moon in Scorpio opposing that. The sun is in close sextile to that, supporting it. I mean, what else? I mean, yeah, that's a wild one. This is a wild card period. I think the middle of July is like a wild card for sure.
And then July 22nd, I've got here Capricorn full moon, Pluto will be in Aquarius, but there's a Sun Pluto opposition.
Yeah. We didn't talk much about that Venus opposite Pluto either because we went on so I can go into that. 'Cause, yeah, Sun
Yeah.
opposite Pluto and like I think this is going to bring up where Mercury opposed Pluto and where Venus opposed Pluto weeks prior. Yeah, so this is right after the Capricorn full moon. But this is the first Capricorn full moon on the 21st with no Pluto in Aquarius. This is the first time.
So will that feel weird for us?
Well, with the Aquarius, yes, it'll feel weird. But I think we talked about this earlier is that like what I liked about when Pluto went to Aquarius the first time in 2023, like I felt that like embracing the newness and the weirdness and the unexpectedness was like a good thing. And it felt exciting and it felt good. It didn't feel uncomfortable like the Pluto Capricorn. Like I got that feeling with that vibration. So I think it's gonna be like this like celebration, so to say. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of like, oh man, we've come so far. We've come so far up this mountain. I just wanna, you know, be in a safe place right now and just feel okay. and be by the beach and just like, yeah, Pluto's not in Capricorn, and this is the Capricorn full moon, and I'm gonna have a picnic. I don't know if it's weird, but it's definitely like we're not used to it. It's something that we're definitely not used to because this is what we're used to. And definitely last year, we had that in July. We had Sun in Cancer, Capricorn full moon with Pluto. It's like that was the last one. That was difficult. This is definitely like, wow, like what's next? Like this is exciting. Like what's next? And then the next day we have the Sun opposing Pluto. And this is definitely where like a lot of these well, I want to talk about the Venus opposite Pluto too, because
Mm.
this is bringing up where Mercury and Venus oppose Pluto. And so this is definitely like highlighting like where like we need to make big shifts and transformations in our lives, within ourselves and within our heart mainly, and not being stuck and fixed in ways that just like aren't really good for you know everybody else that we're involved with. And with that Venus opposite Pluto as well, right before this, like it's like this is where relationships become obsessive and they become manipulative. So a lot of that's coming up at this time, and with the Sun opposing Pluto, it's like actually facing that, like anything within the relationships that are being like, whether it's creative or romantic or friendships or family or whatever, it's like, this is where like that bond is so tight knit between one another that it just can't be broken or severed, where it's just like I can't live without you. Like Venus opposite Pluto is like, if I can't have you, I will kill you. Like I'd rather you be dead than you not be with me. You know what I mean? Like it's
So
that
that
kind of energy.
ultra healthy love.
Yeah. It's very obsessive. And I'm saying that because I have that in my chart, so I know a lot about it. I was born with that. So, and this is highlighting that. This is where it's bringing up where Mercury and Venus oppose Pluto, and it's just like now it's being illuminated. Now it's like facing it for real. Like, things happened over the past couple weeks with Mercury and Venus opposing Pluto. Now it's like it's being brought to the light and you got to face it. And, actually find the common ground. And if you got to let go, you got to let go. If you got to cut the cord, you got to cut the cord. Because with Pluto, there's no in between. It's all or nothing. With Scorpio and Pluto, it's all or nothing. Like, if I can't have you, no one will. If I can't have you, or if you're going to be with somebody else, you don't exist to me anymore, you know? So, but it's also great to like really have like really strong bonds between people. It's just, it can get really scary.
Well,
So,
you just have to find that balance,
intense.
right?
Yeah. And it's karmic. It's karmic, intense relationships that you got to be careful and walk the line with and be very conscious of. And you bring the best and the worst out of each other unconsciously. And it's like each other. It's past life shit all the way down the fucking line.
So then August 4th, we have Mercury go retrograde, which we've talked about, starts in Virgo and then retrogrades back into Leo. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the same day, Venus ingresses into Virgo.
Yep. On that same day.
Yeah.
We did talk about that earlier, right?
Yeah. And so then on August 7th, because I'm just running down the list that I have in chronological order, on August 7th, we've got Venus conjunct retrograde Mercury.
Mm-hmm. I think, this is where past relationship stuff starts to come to the surface. Venus is on its way to oppose Saturn, so it's like things aren't in order. Venus didn't quite oppose Saturn before it went retrograde, and it will when it goes direct, but it's like the moon's opposing Saturn the same day as Venus conjuncts Mercury. So, I mean, and it's like, when it comes to relationship stuff, it's like relationship issues from the past come up, money issues from the past, all these things from the past, people from the past seem to pop up, creative ideas even that you forgot about pop up. You may find some things, find some money you left somewhere. you know? But with the moon opposing Saturn this day too, it's like there's some heavy emotional things that are being brought back up to the surface and that are gonna have to be dealt with and gonna have to be communicated about. You know, the sun is sextiling Jupiter that day, so the sun and Jupiter are supporting each other. So there's a lot of support, you know, to like speak what you believe, you know, about what you love and see things from both sides and see things from multiple angles and be neutral about things. You know, that's a theme this year with Jupiter and Gemini is to be neutral about issues that are coming up. You know, Jupiter's about to square Saturn. As this is happening, it's oncoming, Mars as well. So there's definitely some heavy emotional stuff popping up with this Venus conjunct Mercury retrograde about past stuff.
And August 13th, we've got Mars Jupiter conjunct.
Mars Jupiter.
Yep, right there in Gemini.
And it's gonna square Saturn. So this is, you know, like and Venus too, like is on its way. So with Mars Jupiter, I mean, this is where we are we're not afraid to really speak from a place of our truth and our beliefs, but they need to be backed up by facts. Especially squaring Saturn, we don't want to be like saying and spewing things that are just so out of this world that aren't true and aren't real. Like some things definitely are going to come up that we found out that weren't true and weren't real. Um, and they're going to be some pretty hard lessons to deal with at this time in the middle of August. And definitely a lot of, yeah, it could bring out some frustration for sure. Mars square Saturn, some anger, you know, some confusion, most definitely. Um, and then I honestly, with the moon and Sag at that moment, I mean, I'm pretty sure like the moon is gonna come and activate a T square there along with Venus. So then, yeah, the moon will square Venus. So there's somewhat of a grand cross going on here. Kinda. Venus is only at 11 degrees, so it won't quite square Jupiter and Mars. But then, you know, the moon will come around and Sag and create a T square to Saturn and Mars and Jupiter. So there's definitely some things, you know, about beliefs and truth and facts and what's real. Like there's a lot of that going on this year, and this is definitely one of those moments where it's like, damn.
And at this moment, we're going to be in full swing pre-election. Campaigns are
Right.
going to be going as hard as they can because we're only a few months away from the
Right.
election at this point of 2024.
Hmm. I mean, like we talked about earlier with Neptune, and just so much propaganda and Saturn, Neptune, and propaganda out the ass. So we're gonna see more crazy, weird ass propaganda, the weirdest shit we've ever seen. Like, this is weird. Like with all the mutable stuff when it comes in squares like this, it's just flat out weird. Weird energy, circus to the max.
And on September 1st, Uranus goes retrograde, and Uranus doesn't go direct until January 30th of 2025. So there's a lot of planets that are retrograde during the election.
September 1st, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's close to a trine with Pluto. This is crazy. So I mean, we're Pluto's right back at 29 degrees, 59 minutes. It just moved in.
Oh, so
It,
that's happening
that
at the
day.
same time.
It's happening at the same day. So the same day Uranus goes retrograde, Pluto goes back to 29 degrees, 59 minutes.
So is that going to be a
It,
wild day?
it's going to be a wild day. I mean, it's just another wild card day. And Mars on top of that, squaring Neptune. So it's just like, you know, we keep talking about this mutable theme of just like truth and facts and beliefs and propaganda and the circus, all of it, you know, and this might, with Pluto coming back to 29, this is the last time. This is it. So this is definitely going to impact the Capricorn structure that's holding on for dear life. That's not going to stand up too much longer. In a very strange way. So yeah, some strange things in the bigger scheme of things is definitely going to be happening that day, you know. But I think with the moon and Mercury here as well, it's just like it's going to be it's going to be loud. It's going to be a loud moment. Crazy weird shit's going to happen. It's going to be loud. People are going to be loud at this moment. And I mean, this is right on Trump's ascendant. So, this is going to be loud. This is a loud time while the crazy shit's happening. Yeah.
2 days later, Venus and the South Node will conjunct. But so the South Node is retrograde at that moment.
Yeah. And, you know, with Venus crossing the South Node, we just had this a couple weeks ago. So it's just karmic clearings, big time, massive karmic clearings, relationship karmic clearings. I think this is the last time we're going to see Venus in Libra cross the South Node in Libra for 18 years. So definitely issues when it comes to relationship stuff and where we've been stuck in situations that we can't seem to get out of in our partnerships and relationships. If you haven't really been dealing with that through this Chiron North Node conjunction and moving towards your better self as an individual, like this is definitely going to bring up some uncomfortable karmic unravelings for sure. Especially, I mean, we got Black Moon Lilith here too, so some dark stuff can come out, you know, and Juno conjunct Black Moon Lilith and Venus and South Node. It's like I'm assuming that the moon's gonna be right there the next day on the 4th. Yeah, there might be some really deep dark stuff that can come to the light or just end. It's gotta like this is a moment where like whatever stuff in relationships that are not working out and it's leading to empty dark places is it's just got to be done with. And especially like on the grander scheme of things, it's like this is like a massive judgment day here, you know, like some serious judgments being dropped as Venus crosses the South Node, and it's got to deal with the moon crossing it, and it can be very emotional with whatever is being released and let go of. Like it's a very emotional time, and Mars just moved into Cancer as well, and it just does not want to be there. Very uncomfortable. This is a very uncomfortable time when it comes to relationships and just saying no to things.
And October 2nd is when the first of the next eclipse season happens. New moon solar eclipse in Libra.
There we are. Yeah, so this is right after that Venus, you know, South Node conjunct. Venus is in Scorpio already. Venus is moving pretty quick. Yeah, so I mean, in this eclipse, so this is the last new moon eclipse with the nodes in Libra. So this is definitely like, you know, we just said this with the South Node. It's like this is where the judgment really takes place, and this is right before the election. The election is it's a month away. So this is like the final chess moves, you know, and the gavel coming down. Yeah, it's a massive, massive clearing. I mean, we might oof, I don't want to make predictions about things like that, but I could just say like this is the final eclipse here. This is a massive shift and a massive change, and it's right before the election. And Trump's Neptune is right on the South Node here. Some interesting things are definitely going to come out through this eclipse. And when's the next one?
So the next eclipse is October 17th, which is a full moon eclipse in Pisces. And in between that, on the 11th, we have Pluto going direct. And October 14th, we have Venus oppose Uranus.
In Pisces? I mean, it would be in Aries, right?
Well, Uranus is in Taurus. So,
Well, the lunar
oh, the
eclipse
lunar eclipse, sorry,
in
Pisces.
Aries. No, in Aries.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Look at me getting my facts wrong.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay. So we got the lunar eclipse in Aries, and I just want to kind of look at both of them together. It's kind of hard to look because these are the final ones. This is the last time we're gonna see the nodes here in these eclipse points, and it's right before the election. So this is 24 degrees Juno conjunct the North Node or the Sun. And Moon conjunct Eris, full moon, lunar eclipse, Eris conjunction, which we've been going through. Was a big discussion in 2023. So they're definitely this is a Trojan horse coming through.
This is when it'll all be made clear as to what was happening.
Yeah. And the Trojan horse busts wide open. Out come all the soldiers that are gonna take over Rome, you know. Or
All the fun things.
this is definitely a fun one. I mean, Jupiter. So I think the most interesting aspect to this, other than this Eris conjunction here, is like we have a pretty loose. I mean, it's not pretty loose. It's tightening up, but we basically have a grand cross going on here. So between Mars that's about to oppose Pluto, and then this eclipse point with Eris as well, and Juno, it's definitely like there's some massive havoc going on. There's some chaos. There's going to be some sort of chaos going on for sure. And with Mars opposing Pluto, there's definitely going to be some conflict because days later, Mars is going to oppose Pluto, and I'm pretty sure it's right before the election. So there's definitely going to be some chaos. And this is on Trump Saturn. Mars is going to be on Trump Saturn. I know that. Jupiter is going to be on his Uranus and his North Node. There's some kind of chaos going on here. I mean, with this eclipse, because I mean, this is also bringing up, and we did talk about this eclipse like before, but this is going back to the last eclipse in October 2023 when all the horrible shit went down and all the chaos went down in the Middle East. So this is the final one. It's right before the election. Definitely some kind of conflict, chaos, Trojan horse with relationships. Somebody's wife is involved for sure on the opposite end here. Somebody's wife's involved in whatever weird shit's going down through
Oh,
this.
I have such a prediction and I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, somebody's partner is involved in this, and we're talking on a bigger scale here. So like, well, on a personal level, whatever kind of conflicts are coming up for people, like when it comes to your partnerships and your marriage partner or the what person, there's definitely some things that got to be cleared here, and this is the final kind of challenge of these eclipses of Aries and Libra. So it's definitely like you don't want to create the chaos yourself. You don't want to be the Trojan horse yourself. Put that moon in Aries on Aries. It's like this one you really want to stick with your partnerships, you know, but also know yourself, but also don't let your partnerships cause chaos for you. You want to like maintain a sense of control, like, and there is this need and desire to control the outcome of this situation that's going on here, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's the shit going on the world front in Capricorn land. Like there is this desire and this tension to control, and it's not necessarily the best thing because that desire to control is what's going to trigger that conflict because Mars is that trigger. So if you're feeling backed into a corner or uncomfortable or not safe or secure, that's what's going to trigger this kind of thing. This is the massive trigger point here.
Will this eclipse be as powerful as the one that we were talking about earlier when it crosses the southern border?
No, I don't think so. Just by looking at it, because the nodes are already at 6 degrees, but the full moon is actually happening at 24, so it's still an eclipse, but it's not total. It's the nodes are kind of moved on, but it's still powerful. And I think what's making it powerful is Mars Pluto opposition. And that's the trigger for whatever kind of wild shit is going to happen. Because there's definitely going to be some conflict on this eclipse for sure. I mean, you don't go through a Mars opposite Pluto without some conflict.
So then I've got on November 3rd, Mars opposed Pluto, Venus Jupiter opposition, Moon Mercury conjunct in Sagittarius. That just sounds like a huge day. And this is 2 days before the election. And we haven't touched on this yet, but Mars will be in shadow. It doesn't go retrograde until after the election, but you add that to it.
Right. So Mars is opposing Pluto on the Sunday, November 3rd. Just want to read what else we had because there's so much going on that day.
Venus Jupiter opposition.
Yep. With Mercury and the moon, Venus Jupiter opposition. And once again, I just think, with all this mutable energy and with Mercury and the moon and Jupiter and Gemini, there's just so many beliefs that are being challenged, especially with Venus opposing Jupiter. It's like what's valuable, who values what is in conflict and with is in conflict with Jupiter. Like it and definitely some truth, like the some people are on one side, they believe one thing. Some people it's so polarized. Ah, that's what this whole election's about. It's just it is so polarized. With Mars opposing Pluto, Venus opposing Jupiter. Like this is as polarized as it gets. Because it was in 2016 when Trump won the election, Mars was at the same degree as Pluto here, at 29. And then Mars is going to be in Cancer at 29. Venus is going to be on Trump's moon, Jupiter on his north node in the Senate. He was born on an eclipse. So Venus on his south node, it's like I don't know. Everybody wants him to win. A lot of people want him to win. The world wants him to win. World leaders want him to win. I'm not saying how I feel. I'm just looking at the astrology and I know his chart in my head. So, you know, I don't know if Joe Biden's in the picture or not. I have no idea, to be honest with you. But I know Venus is going to cross his ascendant. Who knows? We don't even know if he'll be there. We know Trump will. I just think this election is going to be so polarized. It's going to be more polarized than it was in 2020. Because it was all like, well, did he really win? Like, the election was rigged and he actually won. It's going to be a lot crazier than that.
So then what is the actual astrology for the 5th, which is when the election takes place?
Mars goes into Leo just before that, and it's in shadow, which is important. So, Moon, Venus conjunction, Mercury conjunct, the Moon and Venus are going to oppose Jupiter. Like, it's the polarity is just so extreme this day. Especially with the Moon Venus conjunction opposing Jupiter, it just amplifies the polarity even more. Then the Moon's gonna square Neptune, so this is just more deception. There's some kind of deception. Like there absolutely is some kind of deception revolving around this election once again, and maybe it goes back to the 2020 election in some sort of way. I don't know, but there's some sort of deception, hands down. With all this mutable energy, squaring Neptune, opposing Jupiter, Mars opposite Pluto, Mars in shadow, knowing it's going to retrograde in a month for a long time after the eclipse. Mercury's in Sag, so Mercury in Sag, for one, like, it's in its detriment. So it's just like Mercury in Sagittarius, it's like, it's like, yeah, I'll give you $1 million here. Let me just go write my check. And it's like, you don't even have $1 million. It's like, they just say things that are huge and aren't even real,
And
It-
Mercury will be in shadow as well because Mercury goes retrograde on November 25th.
Yes, that's true. And when I think about this and when it comes to the election and the whole thing, like, I just think there's so much because we remember in 2020, it just took so long for things like it took longer than it should have to like figure out the real results and things were weird. Things got shady. Like this is gonna take much longer. Something's gonna go down. It's gonna be much weirder, and it's no one's gonna really know. It might not even. Maybe there isn't an election. I don't know. Like this is so strange to me. Like this whole chart is just so strange to me, with how much mutable energies going on where things can just change on a dime, and you think things are one way and it's not. It could be deceptive, very deceptive, some kind of deception going on.
And then if we jump ahead to December 6th, Mars does go retrograde. So that whole retrograde is going to be in Leo and Cancer. And so from 6th of December to February 23rd, we have Mars going retrograde.
Well, Mars goes retrograde December 6th.
Yes.
Mercury's retrograde by the time Mars goes retrograde, so Mercury and Mars are retrograding at the same time, and Venus is going to conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. I think there's leftovers here. The sun's opposing Jupiter the same day Mars goes retrograde, and I just think like if we look at this whole time period here, like there's our beliefs are being challenged so much through this last quarter of the year. Our beliefs have never been shaken up so much. We really thought the past 4 to 5 years our beliefs have been challenged more than that. It's like I don't think so. I think this is probably one of the most confusing time periods and charts I've seen, to be honest with you. Saturn's going to be squaring the T square, Jupiter and the Sun and Mercury and Taurus. Like I think we talked about this before the show.
It's almost as if we've all said so much over the last few years. We've never seen anything like it. We've never lived through anything like this. And the universe has said, hold my beer, watch.
Yeah.
I'm going to level up for you all.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a level up for sure. I mean, Pluto and Aquarius is definitely a level up, but we talked about this a little bit before the show with this Antares conjunction with Mercury and Taurus, the Sun crossing Antares, Jupiter opposing it, Saturn squaring it. Antares is, you know, corresponds. There's a lot of assassination involved with Antares throughout history. Antares, you find a lot of like very powerful people, militant kind of people, like this is like Antares is associated with very strategic military attacks. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Mercury was conjunct Antares like it is now. When John Lennon was killed, Mercury conjunct Antares right after the sun crossed, like there was an assassination. There's a band called Pantera that I love dearly. Like they're a heavy metal band. The guitar player was shot and killed on stage by a Marine who was on December 8th, the same day John Lennon was assassinated. He was assassinated on stage.
What year was
It
that?
was 2001 or it was either 2001 or 2004. Yeah. Tragic. It was horrible. But there's this relationship with Antares where like when planets come into conjunction or opposition or square to Antares, it's like this is when people just get the audacity to just fucking make a move. Whether it's good or big, like even with gambling, the audacity to just make a big gambling stake and you just win millions. Or you're just gonna like implement a military strike and just strike big, or like, I'm just gonna take this person out. That's Antares. Like, you find that throughout history. I mean, it's powerful. Every time I see, I mean, there's so many other. There's something else that happened around December 8th. I don't remember what it was, but there's so many things that happen around December 8th, or with Mercury around Antares and the Sun Antares, where there's just like crazy, wild stuff. When were the Manson murders?
I will Google that for you. It was 2004.
Oh yeah, Dimebag. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was in Ohio for anyone that's interested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when I've looked up Manson murders, it said Tate murders. So August 8th, 1969 to August
8th. It was
10th.
August 8th, not December 8th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
1969. So it was over 2 days.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I just think at this time we could see some of the wildest stuff. Maybe somebody wasn't happy with something, or whether there was something planned out for a long time and they had the audacity to just pull the trigger. I think there's definitely a possibility for that. Like this energy is November and December is just so like unpredictable and chaotic, especially, with Uranus retrograde, Pluto, Venus. There's so much Aquarian Uranus energy that's unpredictable. Mutable energy is just unpredictable anyway. And it's just weird, and you don't know how things are just gonna shift and change. And Mars being retrograde puts a whole nother aspect to that. And then it's gonna come back and oppose Pluto again. So but this time, wow. So Mars, I don't remember when Mars is gonna be at 0 degrees here. It probably won't be even in 2024. Yeah, it won't be. But when Mars, oh wait, that's funny because it's January 1st, 2025, when Mars
One
is
degree.
gonna oppose Pluto with the moon there.
Well, you're kind of answering one of my questions, because one of the next ones was going to be, we're going into New Year's Eve. There you
Mhm.
go. With so many planets retrograde.
Right.
How will that feel? Will it be a heavy
Yeah.
New Year's Eve? Will it just not feel celebratory, or
I think heavy is the best word to describe it. It's the new moon in Capricorn. Capricorn's always heavy.
so you're on the 30th there,
Yes.
not
New
the
moon.
31st?
Well, leading up to that,
Right.
the new moon in Capricorn
Mm-hmm.
is a heavy moment anyway. And definitely Saturn Jupiter square. Saturn being ruled by Capricorn. Oops. There's a lot of heavy Saturn energy going on anyway, so it's like it's definitely not going to be the New Year's of a lifetime, that's for sure.
And even
Mhm.
though Pluto and Mars are not opposing until the 1st,
Mhm.
because they're only a degree off, will we be already feeling that opposition?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I just think November and December, whatever the craziness looks like and whatever people are going through, they're going to feel like they're being pulled in multiple directions at once, and that they're in a freaking circus fun house full of a hall of mirrors kind of vibe. And it's not going to be until this new moon in Capricorn where we start seeing reality kind of a little bit more clear, because when we have the new moon in Capricorn, it is when reality starts to come into focus. Saturn's direct now, but it is going to square Jupiter, so there are definitely going to be some facts and deception that's going to be coming out, you know. But also like challenges to our beliefs. Like all of these things that are going to be happening at the end of the year are going to be so challenging to our beliefs and what we think and what our values are and what our spiritual beliefs are. With this Mars opposing Pluto too, like there can just be, some inner conflict on an unconscious level, and it could be really damaging to the ego. And it's like, man, we really have to band together. We have to stick together. We have to band together in a very Aquarian way. We have to connect with others to get through the craziness, because the end of the year is definitely crazy for sure.
Well, it sounds like we have a bit of everything in 2024. Some incredible moments where we have the ability to manifest and create sort of all the wonderful things we want in our lives, but this crazy journey that we're on together as a collective.
It's like Neapolitan ice cream. You get some chocolate, you get some vanilla, you get some strawberry. Like that's 2024. But there's something missing too. Like there's definitely some rocky road in there as well. And we don't get to eat the rocky road till we get to Thanksgiving, Christmas time. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited for May and June. Obviously, like the benefic times are definitely through the spring and the summer. Um, Pluto and Aquarius, things are definitely gonna get weird and shaken up. Maybe a revolution. Hopefully, a revolution can start.
And you've talked about how divisive this election is going to be based on the astrology. Hopefully, as we navigate through that, whatever it is that's coming out, whatever it is that we're all facing, I hope that after we make our way through it, we're able to come together as a collective
Yeah,
and
I
have a
think
little peace. But have you looked ahead to 2025's astrology?
not as closely as this, because we definitely like went under the microscope
Mm.
for sure. But knowing that that's the first year that we're not gonna have Pluto and Capricorn at all, like I think it's what you just said is that, you know, it's the final showdown of Pluto and Capricorn. It's the boss fight. Things are gonna get weird, very weird towards the end of the year, and then going into 2025, that's when Pluto in Aquarius is in its full effect, and that's we're gonna see a massive transformation because that's what we saw with Pluto and Capricorn was this massive transformation through all the institutions across the world. Definitely through 2024, like it's gonna be up and down when it comes to that level. So, and I think how we're transforming individually on a, individual level and a collective level is like, it's not going to be really visible until 2025. And we have to ride this out and also take like what this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and that Sun, Jupiter, and Taurus conjunction with that Venus, Uranus conjunction. I mean, take that and utilize it to your fullest advantage because when things get weird and strange, like you'll still have the power and ability to maintain and sustain yourself because I think that's what that's all about. Is that's giving people the power to kind of be in their own framework and not be so caught in the matrix because we talked about this at the beginning, but Pluto and Aquarius is people who are going to be completely in the matrix and accepting it, and the people who are completely exiting society and living in their VW buses and dropping acid all day on their farms in the middle of nowhere where they can't be seen.
Choosing their own timeline.
Yeah, in their own timeline. So it's finding that middle ground, and I think 2025 is that beginning. And 2024 is the final showdown.
Well,
Nothing else.
Alex, this has been so much fun doing this with you because we've obviously had conversations privately about astrology, but I love that we were able to do this about the entire energy of 2024. Now, you release a daily horoscope. So, where can people find that and where can they book a reading with you?
Alex Skyles Astrology at YouTube and my Instagram. So just hit me up on Instagram. So that's where I'm communicating with people. And, I haven't done a horoscope in a couple months, considering all the wild things that we've been doing the past couple months. But now I am in this wonderful place and I'm back to it. And I'm so glad we did this and gearing up for the wildness in 2024.
I feel that in 2024, we probably need to get together again and have some of these other spiritual conversations. We've done the astrology, and maybe we need to explore some of those other paths.
I would love that. That'd be amazing.
Well, we will make sure that happens. So if you're not already following Alex, make sure you go and do that. And of course, if you need an astrological reading, he is your guy. Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie.